In the kingdom of Verith, dragons were worshipped like gods. Their shadows passed over cities like storms. Their flames powered royal furnaces. Their roars decided wars before armies ever touched the battlefield. And above them all, ruled one man feared across the entire continent, King Caldraven, the Dragon King. Cold, unforgiving, intouchable. People whispered that Kael had never smiled since childhood, that he executed traitors without blinking, that even dragons bowed their heads when he entered the throne room. But none of those rumors frightened Lyra as much as the way he sometimes looked at her, as though he recognized her, and hated himself for it. Lyra lowered her eyes quickly while scrubbing ash from the palace staircase before dawn. Snow drifted through the open arches of the enormous black castle, while servants hurried silently through the halls, trying not to attract attention from the royal guards. The palace never truly slept, not since the king became cursed. For the last 2 years, darkness had slowly spread beneath King Kael's skin like living poison. Some claimed an enemy kingdom cursed him. Others believed the gods themselves were punishing the Dragon King for massacres committed during the Northern Wars. Whatever the truth was, everyone knew one thing: the king was dying, and desperate kingdoms became dangerous kingdoms. Move faster, witch girl. A silver tray suddenly slammed against Lyra's shoulder. Hot tea spilled down her dress as another servant glared at her cruelly. You want the royal inspector to see you standing around? Several nearby servants laughed quietly. Lyra apologized immediately and knelt to clean the spilled liquid from the floor, ignoring the burning humiliation rising inside her chest. She was used to this. Servants rarely touched her unless necessary. Nobles openly mocked her strange crimson birthmark stretching across her collarbone. Some palace maids refused to sleep in the same room as her because they believed she attracted bad luck. Others called her cursed, or worse, Dragon Witch. The name always spread in whispers, never loudly, because even mentioning the ancient dragon witches terrified people. Centuries ago, the dragon witches nearly destroyed the continent during a war against the royal bloodlines. According to legends, they controlled primordial dragon fire, capable of burning entire kingdoms overnight. The royal family exterminated them all during the Crimson Purge. At least, that was the official story. Lyra pulled her sleeve higher to cover the glowing red veins spreading faintly beneath her skin. They had been getting worse lately, especially whenever dragons were nearby. A deep roar suddenly echoed through the palace walls. Every servant froze instantly. The royal dragons were awake. A second roar followed, then another. The creatures sounded agitated, panicked. Lyra slowly looked toward the massive, open windows facing the dragon courtyard below, and her heart stopped. 3 enormous black dragons circled violently above the palace towers, while soldiers scrambled across the grounds in chaos. The creatures normally obeyed only the Dragon King himself, but now they were roaring toward one specific place, toward the servant balcony where Lyra stood. People noticed immediately. Fear spread across the hallway. One maid backed away from Lyra so quickly she nearly fell. She did something, another servant whispered nervously. I told you she was cursed. Lyra stepped backward instinctively. No, I didn't. Suddenly, every dragon went silent. An enormous shadow passed overhead. Then, the largest dragon in the kingdom descended from the sky. Varush, the Dragon King's personal beast. The gigantic black dragon landed hard enough to shake the entire courtyard. Smoke curled from its nostrils, while terrified guards immediately dropped to one knee. Even the other dragons lowered their heads. But Varos ignored everyone. Its enormous golden eyes locked directly onto Lyra. The beast slowly approached the balcony. Servants screamed and fled. Lyra couldn't move. The dragon's massive head rose until it stood directly before her, separated only by stone railing and empty air. Heat radiated from its scales, while ancient gold eyes studied her intensely. Then, something impossible happened. The most feared dragon in Verith lowered its head, as if bowing to her. The courtyard fell into stunned silence. A guard whispered shakily, "Why is the king's dragon kneeling?" Another voice answered in terror, "Because it recognizes her." Lyra's blood ran cold. Before she could react, footsteps echoed behind her. Heavy, controlled, deadly. The servants immediately knelt. Lyra turned slowly and saw King Kale standing at the end of the corridor. Black armor covered his body like living shadow. A crimson dragon crest rested over his chest while cold winter light reflected across his sharp features. He looked less like a man and more like something carved from war itself. But it wasn't his appearance that terrified Lyra. It was his expression. Kale was staring at her with unmistakable shock and fear. Not fear of her, fear for her. The moment his eyes landed on the glowing crimson veins beneath her skin, something dark and painful crossed his face, as though fate had finally caught up to him. "Everyone leave," the Dragon King ordered coldly. No one hesitated. Within seconds, the entire balcony emptied, leaving only Lyra, the Dragon King, and the massive dragon kneeling silently below. Kale stepped closer slowly, too slowly, like a man approaching a ghost. Lyra lowered her gaze immediately. "I'm sorry, Your Majesty," she whispered shakily. "I didn't mean to disturb the dragons." Kale said nothing for several seconds, then quietly asked, "How old are you?" Lyra blinked in confusion. "Nineten." The king's jaw tightened visibly. Pain flickered briefly across his eyes. "Nineten." Exactly the age she should be. Lyra noticed the way his hands trembled slightly beneath his gloves. Strange black veins spread faintly along his neck, before disappearing beneath his collar. The curse. It was getting worse. Kale suddenly reached toward her face. "Lyra froze." But just before touching her skin, he stopped himself, as if afraid. The Dragon King slowly closed his hand instead. "What's your name?" he asked quietly. "Lyra." The moment she answered, Kale looked like someone stabbed him directly through the heart. Because he already knew that name. He had whispered it for years, inside nightmares. Far away, thunder rumbled across the mountains surrounding Verith. Snow began falling harder, and beneath Lyra's skin, ancient dragon magic slowly started waking up. Kale turned away before Lyra could see too much of his face, but the damage had already been done. She had seen it. The Dragon King knew her, or at least, he knew something about her. For a few breathless seconds, neither of them moved. Snow drifted between them through the open balcony arches, melting against the warm stone where Varos still knelt below. The enormous dragon remained absolutely still, its golden eyes fixed on Lyra with a devotion that made the watching guards tremble. No dragon bowed, without reason, and no dragon of Varos's bloodline had ever bowed to a servant. Kale's voice finally cut through the silence. "You will not speak of this to anyone." Lyra swallowed hard. "I wouldn't know what to say." His eyes shifted back to her, cold again, controlled again. But Lyra could still sense something cracking beneath that control. "Then say nothing." She nodded quickly. Kale stepped closer, lowering his voice so only she could hear. "If anyone asks." The dragon reacted to the storm. Nothing more. Lyra glanced toward Varos. The beast's massive head remained lowered before her, like a knight before a queen. "That doesn't look like a storm reaction," she whispered before she could stop herself. Kale's expression hardened. For one terrifying moment, Lyra thought he would punish her for speaking so boldly. But instead, his face darkened with something almost like grief. "No," he said quietly. "It doesn't." Then, he turned to the guards. "Take her back to the servants' quarters. No one touches her. No one questions her. If I hear one rumor spread beyond this courtyard, I will remove the tongue responsible." The guards bowed instantly. Lyra's heart pounded. Protection from the Dragon King should have felt comforting. Instead, it felt like a warning. As two guards escorted her through the palace halls, whispers followed from every corner. Servants peeked from behind pillars. Noblewomen stopped mid-conversation. Soldiers watched her, as if she had become something dangerous between one breath and the next. By the time Lyra reached the lower servants' quarters, everyone had already heard. The king's dragon had bowed to the cursed girl. That evening, No one sat beside her at supper. The long wooden table was packed with servants, but an empty space surrounded Lyra like an invisible wall. Bowls scraped, spoons clicked, voices lowered whenever she looked up. Finally, Mara, the head kitchen maid, slammed a bowl of thin stew in front of her. "Eat quickly," Mara muttered. "Then go scrub the east furnaces." Lyra looked up. "But I already finished my shift." Mara leaned closer, eyes sharp with fear disguised as cruelty. "Then finish another one." A few servants snickered. Lyra lowered her gaze and nodded. There was no point arguing. There never was. Hours later, while the palace celebrated the arrival of noble guests for the royal healing ceremony, Lyra worked alone beneath the east wing, scrubbing soot from the furnace stones until her hands bled. The furnaces were enormous, built beneath the palace foundation and fed by dragon fire through ancient vents carved into the mountain. Most servants hated working there because the heat was suffocating, and the shadows moved strangely along the walls. Lyra had always liked the place. Down here, no one watched her. No one whispered. No one called her witch. Only the fire spoke. And lately, the fire had begun whispering back. At first she thought it was exhaustion, then madness. But as she knelt beside the furnace mouth, the flames curled toward her hand like living things, glowing deep crimson instead of gold. Lyra stared at them, breath caught. A voice stirred inside the heat. Not human, not exactly dragon. Daughter of Ash. Lyra jerked backward. The flames snapped violently, then returned to normal. Her heart hammered so hard she pressed one hand to her chest. "No," she whispered. "No, no, no." She had spent her entire life pretending nothing was wrong with her, pretending she did not wake from dreams of burning villages, pretending she did not hear dragons calling in the distance, pretending the crimson mark beneath her clothes was just a birthmark and not something alive. But pretending was becoming impossible. A sudden noise echoed behind her. Lyra spun around. A young noblewoman stood at the base of the furnace stairs, dressed in pale blue silk and silver jewels. Her hair was perfect, her smile gentle, her eyes cruel. Princess Eveline, the woman rumored to be chosen as Kael's future queen. "Oh," Evelyn said softly. "So the stories are true." Lyra immediately bowed her head. "Princess, I didn't know anyone was here." Eveline descended the steps slowly, looking around the furnace chamber with elegant disgust. "This is where they keep you?" Lyra said nothing. Evelyn stopped a few feet away and studied her face. "You are prettier than I expected." The words sounded kind. They were not. Lyra kept her eyes lowered. "I should return to work." "Yes," Evelyn said. "Servants should always remember their place." Silence stretched between them. Then Eveline reached out and touched the edge of Lyra's sleeve, pulling it down just enough to reveal the faint crimson glow beneath her skin. Her smile vanished. "So it is real." Lyra yanked her arm back. "Please don't." Eveline's gaze sharpened. "The Dragon King looked at you today." Lyra's throat tightened. He was angry because of the dragon. "No." Evelyn stepped closer. "I know how men look at servants. I know how kings look at threats. But that was neither." Lyra backed away until her shoulder hit the furnace wall. Eveline's voice lowered into a whisper. "He looked at you like a memory." Those words struck something deep in Lyra's chest. A memory. A burning village. A boy with golden dragon eyes carrying her through smoke. Lyra's breathing became uneven. Eveline noticed and smiled again. "You know something, don't you?" "No." "Liar." The furnace flames suddenly surged. Evelyn flinched back. Lyra stared in horror as crimson fire crawled up the stone wall behind her like veins of molten blood. The princess's eyes widened. Then her expression changed. Not fear. Opportunity. By midnight, the rumor had changed. No longer had the dragon merely bowed to Lyra. Now the cursed servant had threatened the future queen with forbidden fire. And before sunrise, the royal priests came for her. They dragged Lyra from her sleeping mat, while the other servants pretended not to wake. Iron cuffs closed around her wrists. Holy symbols burned against her skin. She cried out, but no one helped. Mara only turned her face toward the wall. Lyra was taken through back corridors into the old chapel beneath the western tower, a place servants whispered about, but never entered. The chapel walls were covered in ancient murals, showing women burning beneath dragon-shaped suns, dragon witches. At the altar stood High Priest Orin, thin, pale, smiling. His golden robes shimmered softly in the candlelight, as if soaked in sunlight, but his eyes were lifeless. "Lyra," he said gently. At last, the guards forced her to her knees. Lyra winced as cold stone bit into her skin. "I didn't do anything," she said. "Please, I swear." Orin approached her with a tenderness more frightening than anger. "Of course you did. You breathed. You survived. For blood like yours, that is already a crime. Lyra Froze. Blood like yours." The priest knelt before her and took her chin between two cold fingers. "Do you know what you are?" Lyra tried to pull away. "I'm no one." Orin smiled. "No, that is what they made you believe." He lifted a small silver blade from the altar. Lyra struggled instantly, but the guards held her down. "Please." Orin cut a thin line across her palm. The moment her blood touched the chapel floor, every candle in the room turned crimson. The murals began to glow. Women of fire, dragons of ash, a queen wearing a crown of burning bone. Orin inhaled shakily, eyes bright with triumph. "There you are." Lyra stared at the glowing blood in horror. "No." Orin stood and turned to the guards. "Send word to the council. The bloodline lives." One guard hesitated. "Should the king be informed?" The priest's face darkened. "Not yet." Lyra looked up sharply. "Not yet?" Orin leaned down, smiling again. "King Kale has protected too many dangerous secrets, but even a dragon king cannot protect what the whole kingdom demands to burn." A chill spread through Lyra, despite the heat of the candles. "What do you want from me?" Orin's smile widened. "Only what your ancestors were born to give." Before Lyra could ask what he meant, the chapel doors burst open. A wave of freezing air swept through the room. Every priest and guard dropped to one knee. Kael stood in the doorway. His face was calm, too calm, but the torches behind him flickered violently from the force of his anger. "Release her," he said. Orin turned slowly, bowing with false respect. "Your Majesty, we found evidence of forbidden blood magic." I said, "Release her." The guards immediately stepped back from Lyra, but the cuffs remained locked around her wrists. Kyle's eyes landed on the blood on her palm. His expression changed. For 1 second, his mask slipped. Guilt, terror, recognition. Orin saw it too, and smiled. "You know what she is." Kael walked into the chapel slowly. Each step echoed like a death sentence. "I know she is under my protection." Orin's voice remained soft. "Protection cannot erase blood." Kael stopped beside Lyra. For the first time, he looked down at her not as a king looking at a servant, but as a man looking at someone he had failed long ago. Lyra hated that look, because it made her want to trust him, and she did not know why. Kyle crouched and took her cuffed hands carefully. His gloved fingers brushed the burned skin around her wrists, and his jaw tightened. "This should not have happened." Lyra's voice came out small. "Then why does everyone act like you knew it would?" Kyle went still. The chapel became silent enough to hear the candles crackle. Lyra looked directly into his eyes. "Who am I to you?" Kyle did not answer, and that silence hurt more than any insult. Orin laughed softly from behind them. "How touching. The cursed king and the last witch pretending fate can be delayed." Kale rose slowly. The air changed. Even Orin's smile weakened. "Careful," Kale said. The priest bowed his head, but not before Lyra saw hatred flash in his eyes. "Of course, Your Majesty." Kyle removed the cuffs from Lyra's wrists himself. The holy metal burned his gloves black as he broke the lock with one hand. Then he helped her stand. His touch was gentle, too gentle for a monster king. "Come with me," he said quietly. Lyra should have refused. She should have pulled away. But behind her, the mural still glowed with her blood. In front of her, the Dragon King held out his hand, like a man offering shelter in the middle of a storm. So Lyra took it, and the moment their fingers touched, crimson fire erupted through the chapel floor. The mural screamed. The entire palace shook, and somewhere deep beneath Verith, an ancient sealed gate opened its first crack. The palace bells began ringing immediately. Deep, violent, endless. Emergency bells. Servants flooded the corridors in panic, while guards rushed toward the underground chapel with weapons drawn. The entire western wing trembled from the force of the explosion beneath the floor. Inside the ruined chapel, crimson fire crawled across the stone walls like living veins before suddenly vanishing into darkness. Silence followed. Heavy, terrible silence. Lyra stumbled backward in shock, staring at the burned floor beneath her feet. The moment she touched Kael's hand, something ancient had awakened beneath the castle. She felt it. A pulse, like the kingdom itself had opened one eye. Kael grabbed her shoulders immediately. "Did you hear anything?" he demanded. Lyra blinked rapidly. "What?" Voices, whispers, anything. His intensity frightened her. I don't know." A violent cough suddenly interrupted him. Kael turned sharply away as black blood splattered across the chapel floor. Lyra froze. The curse spreading beneath his skin surged visibly now, dark veins crawling up his neck like poison. Kael gripped the altar hard enough to crack the stone beneath his hand while pain twisted across his face. The high priest watched silently, almost satisfied. Lyra stepped forward instinctively. "You're hurt." Kael immediately backed away from her. "Don't touch me." The sharpness in his voice cut through the room. Lyra stopped moving. For one brief second, hurt flashed across her face before she hid it. Kael noticed, and hated himself instantly. "It's not because of you," he said quietly. "Then why do you look afraid every time I get close to you?" He couldn't answer, because the truth was worse than fear. The last time Lyra touched him, the mate bond beneath his soul nearly awakened completely. And if that happened, the prophecy would begin. Kael closed his eyes briefly. "Not yet. Please, not yet." Suddenly, the chapel doors burst open as Captain Ronan stormed inside with armed royal guards behind him, tall, broad-shouldered, and carrying twin dragonsteel swords across his back. Ronan looked ready for war. The moment he saw Lyra standing beside the king, his expression darkened. "Your Majesty," Ronan said sharply, "the council is demanding immediate containment." Containment. Not arrest. Not questioning. Containment. Lyra slowly realized they weren't treating her like a criminal anymore. They were treating her like a disaster waiting to happen. Kael wiped the blood from his mouth before turning cold again. "The girl remains under my protection." "With respect," Ronan replied carefully. "The palace dragons are becoming unstable. 3 handlers were injured tonight. The beasts keep trying to break their chains." Lyra's stomach tightened, because deep inside herself, she could feel the dragons too. Restless, agitated, calling to her. Kael noticed her expression immediately. His face hardened. "Everyone out." Orin folded his hands calmly. "Your Majesty." Out. The torches exploded. Dragonfire surged briefly through the chapel ceiling as Kael's power burst violently into the room. Even Ronan stepped backward. No one argued after that. Within moments, the guards and priests reluctantly exited the chapel, though Orin lingered longest. Before leaving, the high priest glanced once toward Lyra with terrifying amusement, as though he already knew how this story ended. The heavy doors slammed shut. Lyra immediately stepped away from Kael. "Stop protecting me." His head snapped toward her. "What?" "You heard them," she whispered. "Everyone in this palace thinks I'm dangerous." "You are." The answer came too quickly. Lyra stared at him silently. Kael cursed himself internally. "You don't understand," he said more carefully. "Then explain it to me." Her voice cracked for the first time. Years of humiliation and confusion finally spilled over. All my life people looked at me like I was cursed. Animals react strangely around me. Fire moves when I'm angry. Dragons bow to me for no reason. And now priests are calling me a witch, while you stare at me like I'm already dead. Tears burned in her eyes. Tell me what's wrong with me. KL looked shattered by the question. Because nothing was wrong with her. That was the tragedy. She was exactly what she was born to be. And he had spent 15 years praying she never became it. KL walked slowly toward the chapel, mural glowing faintly behind the altar. Ancient images covered the stone women surrounded by dragon fire, while kings knelt before them. Dragon witches. Lyra followed him cautiously. Kyle touched one mural gently. You know the story they teach children, he said quietly. That the dragon witches were monsters who tried to destroy the kingdoms. Lyra nodded slowly. Kyle's eyes darkened. It's a lie. Silence filled the chapel. Lyra stared at him. What? The dragon witches were guardians. They protected the ancient seals beneath this continent. Seals imprisoning creatures older than dragons themselves. He turned toward her fully. But kings fear power they cannot control. So centuries ago, the royal bloodlines slaughtered the witches and rewrote history. Lui a fait dizzy. No. That can't be true. It is. Then why are they hunting me? Kale looked at her for several painful seconds before answering. Because you're the last one. The words crushed the air from her lungs. Last one. Last dragon witch. Lyra backed away instinctively. No. You were supposed to die 15 years ago. Kyle regretted the sentence immediately when terror flooded her face. But it was too late. Her voice trembled. You know who I am. Kale closed his eyes briefly. Finally, there was no hiding anymore. Yes. Lyra stared at him like a stranger. Then tell me. Kale's throat tightened painfully. Because speaking the truth aloud meant confronting the memory he spent years trying to bury. A village burning beneath dragonfire. Dead bodies in snow. A little girl crying beside her mother's corpse. And a young prince forced to choose between saving her or saving his kingdom. Kale finally spoke. 15 years ago, royal assassins discovered rumors about a surviving dragon witch bloodline hidden in the northern territories. Lyra felt cold. The village they attacked. Kale nodded once. You were there. Her breathing stopped. Flashes exploded through her mind instantly. Fire. Screaming. Blood. In snow. A man carrying her through smoke. Golden dragon eyes. Lyra grabbed her head painfully. No. Kale stepped closer carefully. You were 5 years old. You're lying. You don't remember because your memories were sealed. Lyra's knees nearly gave out. Kyle caught her before she hit the floor. The moment he touched her again, the mate bond surged violently. Both of them gasped. Crimson fire exploded briefly beneath their feet while ancient symbols flashed across Lyra's skin. Kale's curse recoiled visibly beneath his veins as if terrified of her power. Their eyes locked, and suddenly, Lyra saw it. Not with her mind, with the bond. A younger Kyle kneeling before a terrified little girl inside burning ruins. I'll come back for you, he whispered to the child, the little girl crying in his arms. Promise. Kale hesitating. Then, lying. I promise. The vision vanished instantly. Lyra shoved herself away from him in horror. You left me. Kale looked like someone had stabbed straight through his chest. Lyra. You left me there. Her magic exploded emotionally around the chapel. The murals burst into crimson light, while dragon roars echoed beneath the mountain. You promised. Kyle's voice broke for the first time. I know. The silence afterward felt unbearable. Kale turned away sharply, breathing heavily. I thought hiding you would save your life, but you never came back. Those words nearly destroyed him, because every single day since then, he hated himself. For exactly that reason. Lyra wiped tears from her face angrily. My mother died waiting for you. Kyle froze completely. Then very quietly asked, she survived the attack? Lyra's expression hardened. For 3 days. The Dragon King looked devastated. She told me someone would protect us. Lyra laughed bitterly through tears. Turns out she was wrong. Kale lowered his head. He could fight armies, dragons, monsters, but not this. Never this. A deep roar suddenly shook the chapel. Both of them looked upward sharply. The dragons again. Only this time, the sound wasn't fear. It was warning. Then the entire palace trembled violently. Dust rained from the ceiling. Far below the mountain, something enormous slammed against stone from deep underground. Once, twice, a third time. Lyra's blood turned ice cold, because this time, she heard the voice clearly. Awaken the queen. The words echoed inside Lyra's skull long after the shaking stopped. Awaken the queen. Not a whisper. Not imagination. A real voice. Ancient. Massive. Hungry. Lyra staggered backward, clutching her head, while crimson light flickered uncontrollably beneath her skin. Kale reached for her immediately. What happened? She looked up at him with visible fear. There's something under the mountain. Kale's expression darkened instantly. What did it say? Lyra hesitated, because even repeating the words aloud made her stomach twist with dread. It said, her voice trembled softly, "Awaken the queen." The Dragon King went completely still, not surprised, terrified. Lyra noticed immediately. You know what that means. Kale looked toward the chapel floor as though he could see through miles of stone beneath the palace. Yes. Then tell me. Kale's jaw tightened painfully. There are things hidden beneath Verith that should never wake up. That's not an answer. It's the only one you're getting tonight. Lyra stared at him in disbelief. You still don't trust me? Kale snapped back instantly. This has nothing to do with trust. The force in his voice startled even him. He took a slow breath before speaking more carefully. If you hear voices again, you tell me immediately. You do not answer them. You do not follow them. Do you understand? Lyra crossed her arms defensively. You're giving orders like I'm one of your soldiers. No, Kale said quietly. I'm terrified you'll die if I don't. That shut her up. The honesty in his voice hit harder than shouting ever could. For a moment, they simply stared at each other while the ruined chapel glowed softly around them. Then heavy bells rang again across the palace. 3 slow chimes. Kale cursed under his breath. The council. Lyra frowned. What council? The royal houses. Kale's expression hardened immediately back into that cold king everyone feared. If the dragons are reacting publicly to your magic, every noble family in Verith already knows something dangerous is happening. And they'll want you dead before sunrise. The bluntness of the answer chilled her. Kale walked toward the chapel doors. You're coming with me. Lyra blinked. To the council meeting? I'm not leaving you alone. The words should not have warmed her chest the way they did. But they did. Kyle opened the chapel doors and motioned for her to follow. Guards immediately straightened at attention outside, though several visibly stared at Lyra with unease, especially after noticing the glowing symbols still faint. The palace corridors above were chaos. Servants rushed between wings carrying messages while armored soldiers lined the halls. Noble guests whispered nervously behind fans and silver goblets as news spread faster than wildfire. Every conversation stopped when Lyra appeared beside the king. Eyes followed her everywhere. Fearful eyes, hateful eyes, curious eyes, and one pair in particular burned with icy fury. Princess Evelyn stood near the grand staircase dressed in shimmering silver silk, surrounded by noblewomen from the western houses. The moment she saw Lyra walking beside Kale, her expression became dangerously unreadable, but her smile remained perfect. Your Majesty, Evelyn said gracefully while bowing. The entire palace is worried for your safety. Kale barely slowed his stride. My safety is not your concern tonight. Evelyn's gaze shifted toward Lyra. It becomes my concern when a servant capable of forbidden magic walks freely through the royal halls. Lyra lowered her eyes instinctively. Kale noticed. His voice turned colder. She walks beside me by my command. The nearby nobles fell silent instantly. No one missed the meaning behind those words. Royal protection. Public royal protection. Evelyn's fingers tightened slightly around her fan. But surely, she said carefully, The council deserves an explanation. Kyle stopped walking. The air around him grew noticeably colder. You deserve nothing. Even the guards looked uncomfortable now. Princess Evelyn's smile finally cracked at the edges. For years, the entire kingdom assumed she would become queen. She came from the oldest royal bloodline. Beautiful, intelligent, politically untouchable. And yet Kyle had never once looked at her the way he looked at Lyra. Even now, even while protecting a possible monster, Evelyn stepped closer, lowering her voice. Do not embarrass yourself for a servant, Kale. The use of his name made the hallway tense instantly. But Kale's eyes remained locked on Lyra instead. She is not a servant. Lyra's heart skipped. Evelyn noticed too, and hatred flashed openly across her face for the first time. Before anyone could speak again, another violent roar shook the palace. This one came from below, not above. The floor trembled hard enough to crack marble beneath their feet. Nobles screamed while chandeliers swayed violently overhead. Then every dragon in the kingdom roared together. The sound shook the mountain itself. Lyra suddenly gasped. Pain exploded through her chest. A vision slammed into her mind without warning. An enormous underground gate covered in chains. Black fire leaking through cracks. A woman wearing a crown of crimson dragon horns standing before the seal, and thousands of dead dragons covering the battlefield around her. Lyra stumbled. Kale caught her immediately. Lyra. Her eyes glowed bright crimson. The gate, she whispered weakly. Something is trying to open it. Every torch in the hallway exploded into red flames. Nobles panicked instantly. She's losing control. Witch, get away from her. Guards raised weapons reflexively. Kale turned with lethal fury. Anyone who draws a blade dies. Silence crashed down immediately. Even terrified soldiers obeyed. Lyra gripped Kale's arm hard as another vision tore through her mind. This time she saw the same underground gate, but standing before it was not a queen. It was Kale, old, covered in blood, and kneeling before a monstrous creature made entirely of darkness and dragon bones. The vision vanished violently. Lyra sucked in a sharp breath. Kale looked at her intensely. What did you see? She stared at him in horror. You. Kyle's face lost color. Before he could answer, Captain Ronan rushed down the corridor toward them. Your Majesty, he said urgently. The lower prison seals just broke. Kyle froze. Ronan continued grimly. Something beneath the palace is waking up. The entire palace descended into panic. Guards flooded the lower corridors carrying dragonsteel spears, while nobles locked themselves inside royal chambers above ground. Somewhere outside, thunder rolled endlessly across the mountains surrounding Verith, shaking the stained glass windows with every violent strike. But beneath all the chaos, Lyra could hear it, breathing. Something enormous deep under the mountain was breathing slowly through the stone itself. Kale clearly felt it too. His expression had gone deathly calm, the kind of calm soldiers wore right before battle. Seal the eastern tunnels, he ordered Ronan immediately. No one enters the lower prison levels without my command. Ronan hesitated. Your Majesty, if the old prison truly opened. Kyle's voice sharpened dangerously. Then we contain it before the kingdom realizes what lives beneath them. The captain nodded once and hurried away. Lyra watched Kyle carefully. You knew this could happen. Kyle looked toward the trembling floor beneath them. I knew it would happen eventually. Her stomach tightened. You keep saying things like that, because I've spent 15 years trying to stop this night from coming. Another tremor shook the hallway. Somewhere below, metal screamed. Not like chains breaking. Like gigantic chains being dragged slowly across stone. Lyra's blood turned ice cold. The nobles nearby began praying under their breath. One woman whispered shakily, "The gods protect us." But Lyra suddenly understood something terrifying. The gods were not listening tonight. Kale grabbed her wrist gently. Come with me. She frowned. Where? The only place left that still holds the truth. Without waiting for an answer, he led her quickly through the palace corridors. while frightened servants pressed themselves against walls to avoid them. The deeper they moved into the castle, the colder the air became. Soon the polished royal halls disappeared entirely. Stone replaced marble. Torches replaced chandeliers. The lower tunnels beneath Verith looked ancient compared to the palace above, as though the kingdom had been built on top of something far older. Dragon symbols covered the walls. Some had been violently scratched away. Others were stained black with dried blood. Lyra touched one carefully while walking. The symbol glowed faintly beneath her fingertips. Kale noticed. "The magic remembers your bloodline." Lyra pulled her hand back uneasily. "How much do you actually know about me?" Kale stayed silent for several seconds. Then, finally admitted, "Not enough." That surprised her. "You said you knew me as a child. I knew your mother. Lyra Froze." Kale kept walking, but his voice grew quieter. Her name was Seraphine. Hearing her mother's name spoken aloud after so many years physically hurt. Lyra swallowed hard. "You knew her well?" Kale's expression darkened with memory. "She saved my life once." That answer shocked her more than anything else tonight. "My mother knew the Dragon King. She knew the prince I used to be." The tunnel opened into a massive underground chamber lined with ancient dragon statues. At the center stood enormous iron doors engraved with the royal crest of Verith. Kale stopped before them. This place existed long before the kingdom. He pressed his hand against the seal. The doors slowly groaned open. Dust exploded outward. Lyra stepped inside cautiously and forgot how to breathe. The chamber beyond was enormous. An ancient hidden library, buried beneath the mountain. Thousands of old scrolls and dragon-carved stone tablets filled towering shelves stretching into darkness. Huge murals covered the curved ceiling above them, depicting dragons flying beside women crowned in crimson fire. Dragon witches, not as monsters, as queens. Lyra stared upward in disbelief. "All these years," she whispered. "The kingdom lied about everything." Kyle closed the doors behind them. The victors always rewrite history. He walked toward a massive stone table near the center of the chamber. Ancient maps covered its surface, along with old journals and broken dragon relics. Lyra slowly approached one mural, showing a woman with crimson wings standing beside a black dragon king. The resemblance made her stomach twist. "She looks like me. She was your ancestor." Lyra turned sharply. Kale looked exhausted now. Not physically, emotionally, like a man carrying too much guilt for too many years. "The first Crimson Queen," he explained quietly. "The most powerful dragon witch in history." Lyra studied the mural again. The woman's eyes glowed exactly like hers. "And what happened to her?" Kale's jaw tightened. "She fell in love with the Dragon King." The air between them changed instantly. Lyra looked at him slowly, and Kale's voice lowered. Their bond awakened something sleeping beneath the continent. Lyra's heartbeat became uneven. "The prison." Kale nodded once. "The creature beneath Verith is older than dragons, older than kingdoms. The ancient texts call it the Abyss King." The name alone felt wrong, like hearing something forbidden. Lyra folded her arms tightly. "And the dragon witches sealed it away?" "Yes." "Then why kill them?" Kale laughed bitterly. "Because kings are fools." Silence settled heavily between them. Kale walked toward one old journal and opened it carefully. Inside were drawings of dragon marks, blood rituals, and ancient prophecies written in faded crimson ink. One page contained a sentence, circled repeatedly. Kale stared at it with visible dread. Lyra stepped closer. "What does it say?" He hesitated. Then finally, read aloud. "When the last Crimson Queen bonds with the Dragon King, the Abyss Gate shall open once more." The room suddenly felt freezing cold. Lyra looked at him slowly. "That's why you left me." Kale closed the journal hard. "Yes, the honesty hurt more than lies. You thought abandoning me would stop the prophecy. I hoped it would." Lyra laughed softly. "But there was no humor in it. So all these years, you watched me suffer because you were afraid of fate." Kale looked at her painfully. "You think I didn't suffer too?" The words escaped sharper than intended. Lyra stared at him. Kale dragged a hand through his dark hair. finally losing some of his control. "I searched for you for years after the attack," he admitted. But the priests moved faster. They erased records, changed names, hid survivors. His voice roughened. "When I finally found you inside the palace, it was already too late." Lyra's chest tightened painfully. "Too late for what?" Kale stepped toward her slowly. "For me to stay away from you." The silence afterward became unbearable, because neither of them could ignore the truth anymore. The pull between them, the visions, the dragons reacting to her, the way his curse weakened whenever she touched him. It all pointed toward one thing. The mate bond had already started awakening. A sudden, violent roar exploded beneath the chamber. Both of them spun, instantly. The floor cracked. Ancient dust rained from the ceiling. Then a horrifying scream echoed through the tunnels outside. Human screams. Guards. Kyle immediately drew his sword. Black dragon fire ignited along the blade. "What was that?" Lyra whispered. But deep inside herself, she already knew. Something escaped. Another scream echoed closer this time. Then silence. Heavy footsteps slowly approached the library doors from the darkness outside. 1, 2, 3. Kale moved protectively in front of Lyra. The footsteps stopped directly outside the chamber. Then a familiar voice whispered from the other side of the door. "Your Majesty, Captain Ronan." But something sounded horribly wrong about his voice. Too deep. Too wet. Kael's eyes narrowed instantly. "Ronan?" A long silence followed. Then, crack. Massive claws punched directly through the iron doors. The ancient library doors exploded inward. Iron shattered across the chamber as something enormous forced its way through the entrance. Dust and dragonfire burst violently into the air, while Lyra stumbled backward in shock. At first, she thought it was Ronan. Then the creature stepped fully into the torchlight, and she realized the captain was gone. Or worse, half his body still looked human beneath torn armor soaked in blood. But black corruption twisted through his flesh like living roots. One arm had transformed into a monstrous claw covered in dark scales, while jagged dragon bones pushed visibly through his skin. His eyes were completely black. Kale's expression hardened instantly. "Get behind me." Lyra obeyed without arguing. The creature wearing Ronan's body tilted its head unnaturally toward them. Its jaw cracked open too wide as dark smoke poured from its mouth. Then it smiled. "Found you." The voice sounded layered, like multiple things speaking through the same throat. Lyra's blood froze. Kale raised his burning sword slowly. "What did you do to him?" The creature laughed wetly. "He opened the door." A violent tremor shook the chamber again. Somewhere deep beneath the mountain, chains continued breaking one by one. Kale whispered a curse under his breath. "The corruption spread faster than I thought." Lyra frowned fearfully. "What corruption?" Kale never looked away from the creature. "The Abyss King cannot escape fully yet, but its influence can." The monster suddenly lunged. Fast. Far too fast. Kyle met it instantly, with dragon fire exploding from his blade. The impact shattered nearby shelves, while ancient scrolls burst into flames around them. The creature screamed, not in pain, in delight. Black claws ripped toward Kyle's throat, but the Dragon King twisted sideways and drove his sword directly through the monster's chest. Any normal creature would have died instantly. This one only smiled wider. Then, the black corruption spread from the wound directly onto Kyle's blade. Kyle's eyes widened. No. Darkness surged violently up his arm. The curse beneath his skin immediately reacted. Black veins exploding across his throat and jaw, like poison igniting under flesh. Kale staggered backward as agony ripped through his body. The creature laughed hysterically. "The king already belongs to us." Lyra saw Kyle drop to one knee, and something inside her snapped. Crimson fire exploded through the library. Every torch burst bright red while dragon symbols ignited across the walls. The air itself screamed as ancient magic awakened violently around her. The corrupted creature turned slowly toward Lyra. For the first time, it looked afraid. Lyra raised one trembling hand instinctively. The crimson flames answered immediately. Fire wrapped around her arm like a living dragon before blasting forward with terrifying force. The creature slammed through stone pillars and crashed hard against the far wall as flames consumed its corrupted flesh. It screamed horribly. Black smoke poured from its body. Lyra stared at her own hand in horror. She didn't know how she had done that. She only knew one thing. The fire listened to her. The creature tried to stand again. But suddenly Varos burst through the ceiling above. Stone exploded downward as the massive black dragon crashed into the chamber with a roar powerful enough to shake the mountain itself. The dragon immediately pinned the corrupted captain beneath enormous claws, then tore him apart. Lyra looked away as black blood splattered across the stone floor. Silence followed. Heavy breathing. Burning ruins. The smell of blood and ash. Varos slowly turned its massive golden eyes toward Lyra. Then, once again, the dragon lowered its head before her. Kale noticed, and his face filled with dread, because this was no longer coincidence. The royal dragons were recognizing her authority instinctively, as if her bloodline stood above the dragon kings themselves. Lyra rushed toward Kale. He was still kneeling, breathing unevenly, while black corruption crawled violently beneath his skin. The darkness looked worse than before. Much worse. Kyle, don't touch me. His voice came out strained, painful. Lyra ignored him anyway. The moment her hands touched his face, the curse screamed. Literally screamed. Dark energy exploded from Kale's body, while crimson fire surged from Lyra's palms instinctively. Ancient symbols appeared across both their skin as the mate bond pulsed violently between them. Kale gasped sharply. The corruption recoiled. Lyra's eyes widened. It's afraid of me. Kale grabbed her wrists immediately. No, he said hoarsely. It's afraid of what you'll become. Their faces were inches apart now. Too close. Lyra could feel his heartbeat. Fast. Unsteady. Human despite everything people believed about him. Kyle stared directly into her glowing crimson eyes. And for one dangerous moment, neither of them moved. The mate bond burned between them like living fire. Lyra suddenly saw flashes again. Kyle standing over her bed when she was a child. Kale secretly watching her work in palace kitchens. Kale executing servants who abused her behind closed doors. Kale reading reports about her every single month for years. Her breath caught. You were watching me. Kale's expression tightened. Lyra, you knew where I was the entire time. His silence confirmed it. Pain surged through her chest. You left me alone anyway. Kale looked destroyed. I thought distance would keep you alive. You don't get to decide that for me. Her magic flared emotionally. Crimson fire burst around them, while Varos growled uneasily nearby. Kyle stood suddenly despite the pain ripping through his body. You think I wanted this? He snapped. You think I enjoyed watching them treat you like dirt while pretending I didn't know who you were? Lyra stared at him silently. Kale's control finally shattered completely. I was 17 years old when your village burned, he roared. I failed your mother. I failed you. And every year afterward, more people died searching for the last dragon witch. The chamber fell silent. Kyle's breathing shook violently. When I finally found you again, his voice broke quietly. You smiled at me. Lyra froze. Kyle looked away painfully. You still smiled at me after everything. Those words hurt worse than anger ever could. Because Lyra remembered. Every time the Dragon King passed through the kitchens, she looked forward to it. Every small kindness from him felt precious. Every glance from him stayed in her mind for days afterward. And all along, he knew exactly who she was. A deep rumble interrupted them. The entire mountain trembled harder than before. Then came another sound, not chains this time. A heartbeat. Massive. Ancien. Awake. Varos suddenly roared in warning. The dragon backed away from the center of the chamber as cracks spread rapidly across the floor beneath Kyle and Lyra. Crimson symbols ignited inside the cracks. The ancient seal below them was opening, and from the darkness beneath the mountain, something enormous began climbing upward toward them. The floor exploded. Kyle grabbed Lyra an instant, before the ancient stone beneath them collapsed entirely. Both of them crashed backward, as a massive shockwave tore through the hidden library, destroying centuries-old shelves and dragon relics in seconds. Varos roared violently overhead. The giant dragon spread its wings protectively around them, while dust and debris rained from the ceiling. Then, the darkness below opened. Not a tunnel, not a cavern. A pit, an endless black abyss, stretching far beneath the mountain itself. Cold air poured upward from the depths, carrying the smell of ash, blood, and something far older than death. Crimson symbols burned along the edges of the broken stone, while gigantic chains slowly rose from the darkness below. Lyra stared downward, and felt something stare back. Her entire body went numb instantly, because deep inside that abyss, something was smiling at her. Kale saw her expression, and immediately pulled her away from the edge. Don't look into it too long. Lyra's voice came out hollow. It knows me. Kale didn't answer, which was answer enough. A low sound echoed upward from the pit. Not quite a roar, not quite laughter. The sound vibrated through bone itself. Then, a voice emerged from the darkness below. Deep, ancien, beautiful, in the most horrifying way imaginable. At last, every torch in the chamber died instantly. Only crimson light remained. Lyra's dragon mark burned painfully beneath her skin, while the voice continued rising through the abyss. The queen returns. The chains around the pit began rattling violently. Kyle immediately stepped in front of Lyra, sword blazing with black dragon fire. You will not touch her. The darkness laughed softly. Little king, you already gave her to me. Suddenly black smoke exploded upward from the abyss. The darkness took shape slowly inside the chamber, forming into a towering humanoid figure made entirely of shadows and dragon bones. Massive broken horns curved from its skull, while crimson eyes glowed like dying stars within endless blackness. The Abyss King, even incomplete, its presence crushed the air itself. Lyra could barely breathe. Ancient instinct screamed inside her bloodline. Run. But she couldn't move. The creature's gaze locked directly onto her with terrifying fascination. You carry her soul. Lyra's voice trembled. Whose soul? The Abyss King smiled. The first Crimson Queen. Kale's face darkened instantly. Stop talking. The creature ignored him completely. Thousands of years, and still, your bloodline returns to me. Lyra's head pounded painfully. Fragments of memories flooded her mind. A woman standing before armies of dragons. A crown made of burning bone. A king kneeling before her, and endless black fire consuming the world. Lyra gasped sharply. Kael grabbed her shoulders. Stay with me. But the Abyss King stepped closer. Chains dragged behind its body across the broken stone, while darkness spread beneath its feet like infection. Do you know why your kind were created? Lyra shook her head weakly. To seal me. The monster's smile widened. And to love me. Kael attacked instantly. Black dragon fire erupted through the chamber as he drove his blade directly through the creature's chest. The Abyss King barely reacted. Instead, it looked amused. Then it grabbed Kael by the throat. The Dragon King slammed violently into a stone pillar hard enough to crack it apart. Kyle! Lyra's scream shook the room. The Abyss King turned toward her slowly. He cannot protect you from destiny. Kael struggled to stand, while blood ran from his mouth. The corruption beneath his skin spread rapidly now, reacting wildly to the creature's presence. The Abyss King noticed, and smiled. Ah, the curse blooms beautifully inside you, Dragon King. Lera Froze. The curse. Kael looked away sharply. The creature answered for him. You still haven't told her? It laughed softly. How cruel. Lyra's stomach twisted. Told me what? Kael's voice came out rough. Lyra, don't listen. The curse, killing your precious king. The Abyss King's crimson eyes gleamed. Came from me. Silence crashed through the chamber. Lyra slowly looked toward Kael. He couldn't meet her eyes. The creature continued mercilessly. Every Dragon King carries my mark. Their bloodline was chained to me long ago. Kael forced himself upright again. Enough. But Lyra already understood. The reason you're dying, she whispered. Kael's jaw tightened painfully. The royal bloodline made a bargain centuries ago, he admitted quietly. Power in exchange for becoming the prison. Lyra stared at him in horror. Every Dragon King, every generation, cursed, dying slowly while carrying part of the Abyss King inside them. And Kael knew his death was coming long before she ever entered his life. The Abyss King smiled darkly. Yet he still loved you. Its eyes shifted toward Kael mockingly. Even knowing what your bond would awaken. Lyra's chest tightened painfully. Kael looked furious now. Not at the creature. At himself. I tried to stop it. No, the Abyss King whispered. You tried to resist her. Those words hit too close to the truth. Because despite every warning, despite the prophecy, despite the danger, Kael never truly stopped loving her. Not since the night he carried a crying little girl out of burning ruins. The chamber suddenly shook again, only this time much harder. Cracks spread rapidly up the walls while dragon screams echoed throughout the mountain above. Verith roared desperately. The abyss gate was opening wider. The creature slowly spread its arms as darkness flooded upward behind it. Soon the chains break completely. Its gaze locked onto Lyra once more. And when they do, you will remember who you truly are. Lyra's head exploded with pain. Another vision slammed into her mind. A throne of crimson fire. Kael kneeling before her wearing chains. The world burning beneath dragon wings. And herself, smiling while kingdoms turned to ash. The vision vanished. Lyra staggered backward, horrified. No. The Abyss King's voice softened almost lovingly. Yes, my queen. Kael moved instantly, pulling Lyra behind him again. You are not taking her. The creature tilted its head. You still think this story belongs to you, little king? Then suddenly, the Abyss King looked upward, toward the palace above. Its smile widened slowly. The false queen arrives. Kael's expression changed instantly. Fear. Real fear. Before Lyra could ask what that meant, a deafening explosion shook the chamber doors, and Princess Eveline walked into the ruins, surrounded by armed royal knights. But the moment Lyra saw her eyes glowing black, she realized the princess was no longer human either. Princess Eveline stepped through the broken chamber doors like a woman born from darkness itself. Her silver gown flowed untouched. Despite the ash swirling violently around the room, black smoke curled softly around her fingers, while the royal knights behind her stood motionless with empty eyes and corrupted veins crawling beneath their armor. They were no longer soldiers. They were puppets. Lyra immediately felt the wrongness pouring from them. Cold, dead, hungry. Kael's face darkened with pure fury. You. Eveline smiled beautifully. Did you miss me, Kael? The Abyss King laughed quietly behind them. Such a loyal servant. Lyra looked between them in confusion. Servant? Eveline's gaze shifted toward her slowly, and hatred exploded openly across her face. You should have died years ago. The words hit like knives. Kael moved protectively in front of Lyra at once. You orchestrated the attacks in the northern territories. Eveline tilted her head innocently. I merely cleaned up unfinished mistakes. Lyra's breathing stopped. She's talking about my village. Kael's jaw clenched hard enough to crack. The western royal houses have been feeding sacrifices to the Abyss Gate for generations, he growled. Your family started the Crimson Purge. Eveline's smile widened proudly. Of course we did. The chamber fell silent. Even Lyra looked stunned by the casual cruelty in her voice. Eveline slowly descended the broken steps toward them. You Dragon Kings were always too weak to do what was necessary, she continued coldly. You feared the abyss while my bloodline understood its true purpose. Black energy pulsed beneath her skin. The old world deserves to burn. Kael's dragonfire flared violently around his sword. You murdered children, and your ancestors slaughtered kingdoms. Eveline stopped walking. Her expression sharpened painfully. "The difference between us, Kael, is that I stopped pretending monsters can become heroes." The words clearly struck something deep inside him. Lyra noticed immediately, because despite everything, Kael still believed he was a monster. Eveline's gaze slowly returned to Lyra. "And you," she whispered hatefully, "do you know how long I waited to see you burn?" "Lyra Stifana." "When I arrived at this palace," Evelyn continued, "the servants already whispered about the cursed little girl hidden in the kitchens. The king's eyes followed you long before he realized." Kael stepped forward instantly. "Enough." But Evelyn ignored him completely. "So I watched you," she said softly to Lyra. "Year after year, waiting to see if the last dragon witch would awaken." Lyra's blood turned cold. "You knew too." "Of course." Evelyn laughed bitterly. "You were impossible not to notice." Her black eyes narrowed. "The dragons bowed to you even as a child." Kael froze. Lyra looked sharply toward him. "You said no one knew where I was." Kael's silence answered everything. Evelyn smiled cruelly. "He lies beautifully, doesn't he?" Pain flickered across Lyra's face. Kael immediately spoke. "I hid evidence of your bloodline from the council for years, but not from her." His expression darkened. She suspected. Evelyn's smile vanished. "Because you were obvious." Her voice cracked slightly for the first time. "All these years, you never once looked at me the way you looked at her." Kael said nothing. That silence hurt Evelyn more than insults ever could. The darkness around her exploded violently. The corrupted knights suddenly drew weapons as black fire spread through the chamber walls. "You chose a witch over your kingdom," Evelyn hissed. "No," Kael replied coldly. "I chose not to become you." The princess's face twisted with fury. Then she looked toward the Abyss King and bowed. Actually bowed. "My lord," she whispered reverently, "the Crimson Queen has awakened exactly as promised." Lyra felt sick. "You're serving that thing willingly?" Evelyn slowly rose. "You still don't understand, do you?" Her black eyes glowed brighter. "The Abyss King isn't destruction." She smiled almost dreamily. "He's freedom." The chamber trembled harder. Above them, dragon screams echoed through the mountain as chaos spread across the kingdom. Evelyn extended one hand toward Lyra. "Come willingly," she said softly, "and the world reborn from ashes can belong to us." Lyra stared at her in horror. "You're insane." Evelyn's expression hardened instantly. "No, I'm honest." Black smoke erupted violently from the corrupted knights as they charged. The chamber exploded into battle. Kael met them head-on, with dragon fire tearing through darkness, while Varos crashed into the nearest soldiers with terrifying force. Stone shattered beneath claws and swords as corrupted bodies slammed into walls hard enough to crack them apart. Lyra backed away instinctively. Then one knight grabbed her throat. Black corruption spread instantly across her skin. The soldier's empty eyes stared into hers, while a distorted voice hissed from inside him. "Wake up!" Pain exploded through Lyra's body. Visions slammed violently into her mind. An army, kneeling before her. Dragons blackened by abyss fire. Kael chained beside a crimson throne. And herself, no longer human. Something ancient wearing her face. Lyra screamed. Crimson fire detonated outward. The corrupted knight disintegrated instantly into ash while a shockwave blasted through the chamber, throwing everyone backward, including Kael. The Abyss King watched with fascination. Beautiful. Lyra collapsed to one knee, breathing hard. Her magic was becoming unstable. Every emotional surge awakened more of the Crimson Queen inside her. Kael saw it too, and terror crossed his face. Not fear of her, fear of losing her. Evelyn noticed immediately, then smiled slowly. "You finally understand, don't you?" Kael's expression darkened. "She's changing." The princess laughed softly. "No." Her black eyes gleamed toward Lyra. "She's remembering." Suddenly, the entire chamber shook violently enough to split the floor open wider. The abyss gate below erupted with black fire, and from the darkness beneath the mountain, thousands of glowing crimson eyes opened at once. Lyra stared downward in horror. Dragons. ancient corrupted dragons chained beneath the kingdom for centuries. The Abyss King slowly spread his arms toward her. Choose, my queen. The chains below began breaking one by one. Save the world that burned you. Another chain snapped. Or rule the ashes beside me. Kyle moved instantly toward Lyra. But Evelyn blocked him. Black fire exploded between them. You don't get to touch her anymore, Evelyn hissed. Kale's dragon eyes burned gold with fury. She is not yours. Evelyn smiled darkly. No. Her gaze shifted toward Lyra. She belongs to fate. The chains beneath the abyss gate continued breaking, one after another. Each snap echoed through the mountain like thunder, while corrupted dragons stirred within the darkness below. Their glowing crimson eyes opened slowly across the abyss, illuminating the chamber with terrifying light. The entire kingdom of Verith trembled above them. Lyra could feel the dragons now. Not hear them. Feel them. Ancien pain. Ancien rage. Centuries of imprisonment buried beneath stone and blood. And somehow, they recognized her. The realization terrified her more than the Abyss King itself. Kael fought through Evelyn's black flames toward Lyra again, but the corrupted princess blocked him mercilessly. Every strike from Kael's dragonfire shattered stone pillars, while Evelyn answered with abyss magic strong enough to darken the air itself. You cannot protect her forever, Evelyn shouted over the chaos. Kael slammed his sword against hers hard enough to crack the floor beneath them. I only needed to protect her once. For a split second, pain crossed Evelyn's face. Because despite everything, a part of her had loved him too. Then the darkness inside her swallowed it whole. You never chose me, she whispered bitterly. Kyle's expression remained cold. I never knew you. Evelyn screamed in fury and unleashed a massive wave of black fire. The explosion hurled Kale across the chamber. Kyle. Lyra instinctively reached toward him, and the mate bond awakened completely. The world stopped. Crimson light exploded through the chamber, while ancient dragon symbols burned across the walls, the floor, and the ceiling itself. Every dragon beneath the abyss roared simultaneously, as overwhelming power surged between Lyra and Kael like a heartbeat shared by two souls. Both of them gasped sharply. The bond burned visibly now. A glowing crimson mark spread across Kael's chest beneath his armor, while identical symbols appeared over Lyra's heart. The Abyss King smiled slowly. There it is. Evelyn Froze. No, but it was too late. The ancient mating bond between Dragon King and Crimson Queen had fully awakened, and with it came memories. Not vision. Memories. Lyra suddenly saw everything. A young Kael, secretly visiting her village for years before the massacre. Her mother laughing softly beside him. Kyle teaching little Lyra how to hold wooden dragon carvings. The night assassins attacked. Kyle arriving too late. Her mother bleeding in the snow while forcing him to flee with Lyra. Protect her, Seraphine whispered desperately, even if she hates you for it. Tears filled Lyra's eyes instantly. Then another memory struck. Kyle standing outside the servants' quarters night after night for years just to make sure she was alive. Kyle secretly paying healers when she became sick as a child. Kale executing a nobleman who assaulted one of the kitchen maids because Lyra cried afterward. Kyle keeping every drawing she ever made for the palace dragons. Every lonely year. Every silent sacrifice. Every moment he watched her from a distance while pretending not to care. Lyra staggered from the emotional weight of it. Kale looked equally shattered, because through the bond, he saw her too. The little girl waiting every winter for someone who never came back. The servant teenager secretly smiling whenever the Dragon King entered the kitchens. The nights she cried alone, wondering why no one ever chose her. The moment she fell in love with him, and the moment she believed he condemned her to death. Kyle's breathing broke unevenly. Lyra. She looked at him through tears. The bond pulsed again, and suddenly the curse inside Kyle screamed. Black corruption erupted violently across his body, while abyss magic poured from his veins like poison, rejecting the mate bond itself. Kyle dropped to one knee in agony as darkness spread rapidly up his throat. The Abyss King's smile widened. The prison rejects love. Lyra immediately ran toward Kale. This time, Eveline didn't stop her. The corrupted princess simply watched in horror as Lyra fell beside the Dragon King and grabbed his face desperately. Coil. His body shook violently beneath the curse. "Don't touch me," he gasped painfully. "It'll spread to you." "I don't care." The words escaped instantly. Kyle stared at her. Real fear entered his eyes. Because she meant it. Lyra pressed her forehead against his. The mate bond erupted with blinding crimson light. Ancient dragon magic flooded through both of them, while the curse fought violently against her power. The chamber shook harder, as black energy and crimson fire collided around their bodies, like two gods at war. Then suddenly, Lyra saw the truth hidden inside the curse. The Dragon Kings were never jailers. They were sacrifices. Each generation carried part of the Abyss King inside their bloodline to keep the ancient prison sealed. Every king died slowly from corruption, while the royal court lied to the world and called it divine power. Kale had known since childhood that the curse would eventually kill him, and still, he loved her anyway. Lyra's heart shattered completely. "You idiot," she whispered through tears. Kyle laughed weakly despite the pain. "That's fair." The moment between them felt fragile. Beautiful. Human. And the Abyss King hated it. The monster's voice thundered across the chamber. Enough. Darkness exploded upward from the abyss. The chains beneath the gate shattered completely. Thousands of corrupted dragons began climbing toward the surface. The end had begun. Varos roared desperately while palace alarms echoed faintly from far above. The kingdom had no idea monsters were already rising beneath their feet. Eveline slowly stepped toward the Abyss King. Even she looked shaken now. "My lord," she whispered. The gate opened too early. The creature's crimson eyes never left Lyra. No. Its smile widened. The queen simply made her choice. Lyra looked up sharply. What choice? The Abyss King spread its arms toward the darkness below. Love, or the world? Silence fell. Then the creature pointed directly at Kale, because the Dragon King cannot survive both. Lyra felt cold instantly. Kyle already knew. She saw it on his face. The bond, the curse, the prophecy. They could not exist together forever. Either the mate bond would destroy the prison, or the curse would eventually consume Kyle completely. And somewhere deep beneath the mountain, the abyss gate continued opening wider. The chamber shook so violently now that entire sections of the ceiling collapsed into the abyss below. Stone pillars cracked apart. Ancient dragon statues shattered across the floor. And still, the abyss gate continued opening. The corrupted dragons beneath the kingdom clawed upward through darkness and chains, while their roars echoed through every tunnel beneath Verith, like the screams of ancient gods finally waking from nightmares. Kale forced himself to stand, despite the curse tearing through his body. Black corruption spread visibly across half his throat now, pulsing against the glowing crimson mate mark burning beneath his armor. He looked at Lyra with quiet devastation, because he finally understood the truth completely. There had never been a future where both of them survived. The prophecy was not punishment. It was balance. The Crimson Queen awakened life, powerful enough to challenge the abyss itself. The Dragon King carried death powerful enough to contain it. Together, they broke the world apart. Lyra saw the realization in his eyes immediately. No. Kale gently touched her face. His fingers trembled. Listen to me carefully. No. Lyra. We are not doing this. Her voice cracked with panic. For the first time since her awakening, Lyra looked less like a queen and more like the frightened girl abandoned in ashes years ago. And somehow that hurt Kyle even more, because he loved both versions of her. The servant girl, and the monster fate wanted her to become. Another chain shattered below. A corrupted dragon burst upward from the abyss. The creature slammed into the chamber ceiling with a deafening roar, black fire pouring from between skeletal jaws, while ancient chains dragged behind its body like broken wings. Varos attacked instantly. The two dragons collided in mid-air, with enough force to split stone apart. Kale grabbed Lyra's hand. "We don't have time." She pulled away angrily. "You're talking like you've already decided to die." Kyle remained silent, and that silence answered everything. Lyra backed away from him slowly. "No." The Abyss King watched them with visible fascination. "Such fragile creatures," it murmured. "You break your own hearts before fate ever touches you." Evelyn stood beside the creature now, but even she looked increasingly uneasy. The darkness pouring from the abyss had become unstable, spreading far beyond her control. "My lord," she whispered nervously, "the dragons are escaping the lower tunnels." "Good." The monster smiled. "Let kingdoms remember fear again." Above them, distant screams echoed faintly from the city. The corrupted dragons had reached the surface. Lyra heard bells ringing frantically across Verith. Fire, chaos, death, beginning. And suddenly she understood something horrible. This was no longer about prophecy. People were already dying. Kale stepped closer again, lowering his voice. "There may still be a way to stop this." Hope flickered instantly across her face. Then Kyle destroyed it. "But only one of us can close the gate." Lyra stared at him in horror. "No. The Crimson Queen's blood can reseal the abyss." I said no. Her magic exploded violently with her emotions. Crimson fire surged across the chamber, while the corrupted dragons below roared in response. The Abyss King watched her carefully now, almost lovingly, because rage strengthened her. Pain awakened her. Kyle grabbed her shoulders firmly. "Listen to me." Lyra's glowing eyes locked onto his. For one terrifying moment, Kyle saw the ancient queen hidden beneath her human grief. Not Lyra. Something older. Something born for war. Then she blinked, and the frightened girl returned. Tears spilled down her face. "I just found you again," she whispered brokenly. Those words nearly destroyed him. Kale pulled her into his arms instantly. The mate bond pulsed painfully between them as she buried her face against his chest. For a few fragile seconds, the world disappeared around them. No prophecy, no monsters, no kingdom. Only two broken people holding each other at the end of the world. Kale closed his eyes. If fate were kinder, maybe they could have lived quietly somewhere far from crowns and dragons. Maybe Lyra could have laughed more. Maybe he could have learned how to smile again. Maybe. But fate had never been kind to either of them. Another roar shook the chamber. Varos crashed violently across the floor after being struck by corrupted dragon fire. The great black dragon struggled to rise, while more abyss creatures climbed from the gate behind it. Too many. Far too many. Kyle opened his eyes slowly. Decision settled across his face, and Lyra felt it through the bond instantly. Fear slammed into her chest. "No." Kyle kissed her forehead softly. "I'm sorry." Then he shoved her backward. Black dragon fire erupted around him. Lyra screamed as Kale launched himself directly toward the abyss gate alone. Kyle. The Dragon King landed before the opening abyss, while corruption exploded across his body completely. The black curse finally awakened in full beneath his skin, transforming dragonfire into darkness itself. The Abyss King suddenly stopped smiling, because it finally understood what Kael intended to do. "You dare." Kael drove his sword directly into the center of the gate. The curse inside his blood detonated. Black fire erupted through the abyss violently, as ancient chains wrapped around Kael's body from every direction. The gate began collapsing inward while corrupted dragons screamed in fury. Kael looked back toward Lyra one last time, and smiled. Actually smiled, for the first time in years. "Live," he whispered through the bond. Lyra broke. "No." Crimson fire exploded through the chamber so violently that reality itself seemed to tear apart. Every dragon roared simultaneously while ancient symbols burned across Lyra's skin from throat to fingertips. The Crimson Queen awakened completely. Not because of rage, because of loss. The Abyss King stared upward in horror. Impossible. The ancient queen inside Lyra finally opened her eyes, and the world trembled before her. The world stopped breathing. Crimson light swallowed the entire abyss chamber, while ancient dragon symbols ignited across every wall, every chain, every stone buried beneath Verith. The mountain itself trembled, as overwhelming power erupted from Lyra's body in violent waves. The air burned, reality bent. Even the Abyss King stepped backward. For the first time in thousands of years, the creature looked afraid. Lyra slowly lifted her head. Her tears evaporated instantly within the heat surrounding her, while crimson dragonfire spiraled around her body like living wings. Ancient markings spread across her skin in glowing patterns older than kingdoms themselves. But the most terrifying part was her eyes. No longer merely human, no longer merely dragon. They looked eternal. The Crimson Queen had awakened, and deep within the mate bond, Kael felt it immediately. Power beyond anything he imagined. Power capable of destroying worlds. The collapsing abyss gate froze mid-destruction as Lyra stepped forward once. The entire chamber cracked. Evelyn stumbled backward in horror. No, the princess had spent her entire life searching for power, manipulating kingdoms, serving darkness, sacrificing innocent people. And still, she had never witnessed anything like this. Lyra barely looked at her, because the moment Kael tried sacrificing himself, something inside her soul shattered completely, and what emerged from the broken pieces was no longer weak enough to kneel before fate. The Abyss King stared at her intensely. You remember now. Fragments of ancient memory flooded Lyra's mind. An empire of dragons bowing beneath crimson skies. A queen standing atop a mountain of burning crowns. The first Crimson Queen commanding dragon armies beside a dark-haired king wearing black armor. Love, war, betrayal, and the Abyss King laughing while kingdoms burned around them. Lyra staggered slightly. Too many memories. Too many lives. Kael forced himself toward her despite the chains tightening around his body near the gate. Lyra, he shouted desperately. Stay with me. His voice cut through the chaos instantly. Lyra looked toward him, and the ancient storm inside her paused. Because beneath all the power, beneath all the awakening memories, she was still herself. Still, the servant girl who smiled too softly. Still, the lonely child who waited for someone to come back. Still, the woman who loved him. The Abyss King noticed the hesitation and smiled coldly. There she is. Its voice darkened. The weakness. Black fire exploded outward from the creature as it launched directly toward Kael. The abyss chains tightened violently around the Dragon King's body, while corruption spread across his skin like wildfire. Kael's strength was failing rapidly now. The curse was consuming him alive. Lyra moved instantly. Not walking. Vanishing. 1 second she stood across the chamber. The next, she appeared between Kael and the Abyss King in an explosion of crimson fire. The impact alone shattered the floor for hundreds of feet. The Abyss King stared at her hand, buried through its chest. Silence filled the chamber. Then, Lyra spoke, and her voice no longer sounded entirely human. You do not touch him. The monster actually recoiled, because the Crimson Queen's power had surpassed the prison itself. Evelyn looked horrified. My lord, the Abyss King ripped itself away from Lyra's grip while darkness poured violently from the wound in its chest. You would choose love over destiny again? Lyra's expression hardened. I would burn destiny itself for him. The words shook the abyss. Ancient dragons beneath the gate roared wildly in response, while crimson fire spread across the chains imprisoning Kael. The Abyss King laughed bitterly, and there it is. Its crimson eyes gleamed. The same mistake your predecessor made. Another memory slammed into Lyra. The first Crimson Queen kneeling beside a dying Dragon King, while the Abyss Gate opened behind them. The ancient queen crying exactly the way Lyra cried now, and choosing love over the world. The vision vanished. Lyra's breath shook. The Abyss King spread its arms slowly. History repeats itself. Little queen, love always destroys your kind. Kael finally broke one arm free from the chains binding him. Lyra. His voice came out weak now. Don't listen to him. But Lyra understood the truth now. The cycle had happened before. Again and again. Dragon kings falling in love with crimson queens. The abyss awakening. Sacrifice. Loss. Endless repetition across centuries. The kingdom above trembled violently as more corrupted dragons escaped into Verith. Fire spread across the capital while distant screams echoed faintly from the surface. People were dying already. Kale saw the conflict tearing through her, and his heart broke, because he knew what she was thinking. The same impossible choice. Him or everyone else. Kyle forced himself to stand, despite the chains and corruption destroying his body. Lyra, he whispered softly through the bond. She looked toward him immediately and saw peace in his eyes. Not fear, not regret. Peace. I need you to listen carefully. Tears filled her eyes again. No. I spent 15 years trying to protect you from becoming this. He smiled weakly, but maybe I was wrong. The mate bond pulsed gently between them. Varm. Painful. Beautiful. Kyle's voice trembled softly. You were never meant to be feared. Lyra shook her head desperately. Please, stop talking. Like goodbye. Another chain wrapped around Kyle's chest. The abyss was pulling him deeper. He ignored it. Instead, he looked at her like she was the only thing in existence worth seeing. You gave me something no crown ever could. Lyra's breath hitched painfully. Kale closed his eyes briefly. A reason to wish I had more time. The words shattered her completely. Because for all his power, for all his titles, for all the fear surrounding his name, Kyle had been lonely too. The Abyss King suddenly roared with fury. Darkness exploded upward as the gate destabilized violently. Enough. The chamber began collapsing entirely now. Stone crumbled. The abyss widened. Reality itself cracked around the Crimson Queen's awakening power. And somewhere above them, the bells of Verith suddenly stopped ringing. Silence fell across the kingdom. Then came screams. Thousands of screams at once. Lyra looked upward sharply. The corrupted dragons had reached the city. Fire rained from the sky above Verith. The moment the corrupted dragons reached the capital, the kingdom descended into nightmare. Black flames devoured towers in seconds while civilians fled screaming through collapsing streets. Royal soldiers fired enchanted ballistae toward the sky. But the corrupted beasts tore through them like paper. The age of dragons had returned, not as gods, as monsters. Far below the city, the abyss chamber continued collapsing around Lyra and Kale, while crimson fire and darkness tore reality apart. Lyra could hear the people dying above them, children crying, buildings falling, dragons roaring, and through the mate bond, she felt Kale hearing it too. Every scream crushed him, because despite everything, Verith was still his kingdom, his responsibility. Even now, even dying, Kale looked upward weakly. Ronan, he whispered. Lyra's heart twisted. Captain Ronan. The guards. The servants. So many already gone. The Abyss King spread its arms toward the chaos above with satisfaction. Look closely, Crimson Queen. This is the true nature of the world. More corrupted dragons burst from the abyss behind it, climbing toward the surface through shattered tunnels beneath the mountain. Kings create suffering. Kingdoms create cages. And love, the creature smiled darkly. Love only gives pain sharper teeth. Lyra's flames surged violently around her. Stop talking. The Abyss King tilted its head. You know, I speak truth. Another vision slammed into Lyra's mind. The first Crimson Queen standing beside the Abyss King willingly. Not chained. Not forced. Choosing darkness after watching humans massacre her people. Choosing destruction because the world betrayed her first. Lyra staggered. Because part of her understood. Part of her wanted to burn everything. The nobles who mocked her. The priests who hunted her. The kingdom that chained her to die. The Abyss King sensed it instantly. Yes, you feel it now. Crimson fire darkened around Lyra. More violent. More unstable. Kael's expression changed immediately. Fear. Not of her. Foya. Lyra, he said firmly. Look at me. She didn't move. The rage inside her felt endless. Beautiful. Powerful. The abyss whispered through her bloodline. Burn them. Burn. All of them. They deserve it. The Crimson Queen's ancient memories flooded deeper into her mind. Kingdoms betraying dragon witches generation after generation. Humans hunting dragons for power. Kings slaughtering innocent bloodlines out of fear. Pain across centuries. Enough pain to drown entire worlds. Lyra's eyes glowed brighter. The chamber trembled harder. The Abyss King smiled slowly. There she is. Kael suddenly shouted her name. Not as a king. Not commanding. Begging. Lyra. The sound cut through the darkness instantly. Lyra looked toward him and saw something that shattered the abyss whispering inside her. Kael was afraid. Not for himself. For her soul. Even chained. Even dying. Even while the kingdom burned above them. He still cared more about losing her than saving himself. The realization broke the darkness gripping her heart. Tears spilled down Lyra's face. I don't know how to stop this, she whispered. Kael's expression softened instantly. You already did. She shook her head helplessly. People are dying. Yes, his answer hurt. Because it was true. Kael forced himself closer despite the abyss chains tearing into his flesh. But if you let hatred decide who you become, his voice weakened painfully, then the abyss already won. Silence fell. Even the Abyss King watched carefully now. Lyra stared at Kael through tears and fire. The Dragon King, who had every reason to become cruel, but never fully did. The man who carried guilt like chains around his own soul for 15 years. The king who watched her suffer, because he thought distance would save her life. Broken, flawed, lonely, yet still trying to protect the world. Even after the world failed both of them. Lyra slowly realized something. The abyss was wrong. Love did not destroy them. Fear did. Fear made kings slaughter witches. Fear made Kael abandon her. Fear made kingdoms become monsters. But love was the only reason she still wanted to save anyone at all. The Crimson Queen's fire shifted instantly. The darkness inside it disappeared. Pure crimson light exploded through the chamber. The Abyss King's smile vanished. No. Lyra rose slowly into the air, while dragonfire spiraled around her like wings made from stars themselves. And this time, the power felt different. Not rage. Choice. She looked directly at the Abyss King. You were right. About one thing. The creature narrowed its crimson eyes. Lyra's voice thundered through the collapsing abyss. The world is cruel. The kingdom above shook violently as crimson light burst through cracks in the mountain. But I refused to become cruel with it. The Abyss King roared in fury. Darkness exploded upward toward her. Lyra answered with dragon fire, powerful enough to split the abyss apart. The collision shook the entire continent. Above them, every dragon in Verith suddenly froze mid-flight. Citizens looked upward in shock as crimson light pierced the clouds like dawn itself. And for the first time in centuries, the dragons bowed, not to a king, to their queen. Far below the kingdom, Kael watched Lyra rise above the abyss like a living god of fire. Beautiful, terrifying, and heartbreakingly good despite everything done to her. The mate bond pulsed weakly between them. Kael smiled sadly, because now he finally understood. The prophecy was never warning the world about Lyra. It was warning the world what it might lose. The Abyss King screamed as Lyra's flames burned through its darkness. But even while fighting, Lyra looked back toward Kael and saw the chains pulling him slowly toward the collapsing gate. His sacrifice was still happening. Time was running out. No. The word escaped Lyra like a vow. The moment she saw the abyss chains dragging Kael closer toward the collapsing gate, panic ripped through her chest stronger than any ancient power. Everything else disappeared. The burning kingdom, the dragons, the prophecy. None of it mattered if she lost him. Lyra shot downward through the storm of crimson fire and darkness, landing beside Kyle hard enough to shatter the stone beneath her feet. The chains immediately recoiled from her touch, hissing like living creatures burned by sunlight. Kyle grabbed her wrist, weakly. "Lyra." His voice sounded exhausted now. "You need to finish sealing the gate. Not without you." His eyes closed briefly. "Please don't make this harder." Anger flashed instantly across her face. "Harder?" she whispered shakily. "You tried to die without even asking me." Kyle almost laughed, despite the pain tearing through him. "That sounds like something you would do too." She hated that he was right. The Abyss King rose again through the collapsing darkness, its massive body reforming from smoke and shadow while corrupted dragons screamed around it. "Foolish creatures. You still believe love changes fate." Lyra turned sharply toward the monster. Crimson flames exploded outward from her body. "Maybe it does." The creature lunged. Lyra answered instantly. The Crimson Queen and the Abyss King collided with enough force to split the Abyss Chamber entirely apart. Darkness and dragon fire ripped through the mountain beneath Verith, while ancient magic exploded across every surface. Kale struggled against the chains, trying to stand, but the curse inside him was devouring his strength too quickly. Black veins covered nearly half his body now. He could feel death approaching, and worse, he could feel Lyra trying to fight fate itself for him. The abyss trembled violently as Lyra unleashed wave after wave of crimson fire against the creature towering before her. But the Abyss King kept reforming. Again, because it was not truly alive. It was the darkness hidden inside every kingdom, every cruel choice, every betrayal, every fear. You could wound it, but not kill it. The creature laughed, while blocking her flames with waves of black fire. "You cannot destroy me, little queen. I exist inside human hearts." Lyra's jaw tightened. "Then I'll burn you out of mine first." The Abyss King's smile faded slightly. Far above them, the kingdom continued collapsing into chaos. Corrupted dragons attacked palace towers while civilians desperately fled through burning streets. But something strange had started happening. The royal dragons were fighting back. Not the corrupted beasts. The true dragons. The creatures that once served the Dragon Kings had turned against the abyss corruption itself. And every single one followed the same direction. Toward the crimson light beneath the mountain. Toward Lyra. Veros crashed through falling debris beside her, with a deafening roar. Black scales covered in blood and ash. Behind him came more dragons. Ancient silver dragons. Scared war dragons. Even wild mountain dragons that never obeyed humans. All of them descended into the abyss chamber, and all of them bowed their heads toward Lyra. The Abyss King looked genuinely shocked for the first time. Impossible. Kyle understood immediately. The dragons were not responding to power alone. They were responding to her heart. Because dragons, the oldest creatures in existence, recognized truth better than humans ever did. And Lyra's soul remained pure despite everything. The Crimson Queen slowly rose into the air, surrounded by dragons and crimson fire. The image looked less like a woman, and more like a goddess born from the end of the world. The Abyss King roared furiously. Darkness erupted upward in massive waves, while corrupted dragons answered its rage from the collapsing city above. The final battle began. Dragon collided against dragon across the abyss, while crimson fire and black flames consumed the underground kingdom beneath Verith. Lyra fought like living fire itself. Every movement shattered darkness. Every scream from the Abyss King shook the continent. But slowly, very slowly, the creature began weakening. Kyle saw it, and so did the abyss. The monster suddenly changed tactics. Instead of attacking Lyra, it attacked him. Black chains erupted violently from the gate and wrapped around Kale's throat before dragging him directly toward the abyss. Kyle. Lyra screamed and turned instantly. Too late. The Dragon King slammed hard against the edge of the collapsing gate, while darkness poured into his body through the curse. The Abyss King smiled viciously. One life. For one kingdom. Kale looked toward Lyra, and through the mate bond, she felt his decision immediately. Acceptance. No, not acceptance. Peace. He had already chosen to die. The realization shattered her. Tears filled her glowing crimson eyes. "You don't get to leave me again," she whispered. Kale's expression broke softly. The chains dragged him closer toward the abyss. Another second, and he would disappear forever. Then suddenly, Lyra remembered something. A memory hidden deep inside the first Crimson Queen's soul. Not a weapon, not destruction. A forgotten ritual. A union. Her eyes widened. The first Dragon King and the first Crimson Queen were never meant to destroy each other. They were meant to share the burden together. The ancient kingdoms twisted the ritual into sacrifice after fear corrupted the world. But the original bond was balance. Lyra looked at Kale desperately. "There's another way." The Abyss King immediately froze. For the first time, the creature looked afraid again. Kyle frowned weakly. "Lyra." But she was already moving. Crimson fire engulfed both of them as Lyra grabbed Kale's face and pressed her forehead against his. The mate bond exploded completely open. Not as love alone, as power. Ancient dragon symbols covered both their bodies while the abyss chains shattered apart one by one. The Abyss King roared violently. No. Lyra finally understood the truth. The Crimson Queen was never meant to stand alone, and neither was the Dragon King. Together, they were the seal. The world exploded into light. Crimson fire and black dragon flames spiraled together around Lyra and Kale as the mate bond opened completely for the first time in history. Ancient symbols burned across their skin, while every dragon in the abyss chamber roared loud enough to shake the heavens above Verith. The Abyss King screamed, not in anger, in fear, because the creature finally understood what the ancient kingdoms had hidden for centuries. The Dragon Kings and Crimson Queens were never supposed to sacrifice each other. They were supposed to stand together. The old world corrupted the ritual because humans feared balance they could not control. So generation after generation, kings died alone, queens burned alone, and the abyss kept growing stronger from their suffering. But Lyra had broken the cycle. Kale gasped sharply as the mate bond flooded through him completely. Warmth. Light. Here. The corruption inside his body recoiled violently beneath the overwhelming force of their joined power. Black veins cracked apart across his skin, while crimson fire wrapped around the curse like chains forged from sunlight. Lyra held his face tightly. "Stay with me." Kale looked stunned. "You found the original ritual." Fragments of ancient memory flowed between them through the bond. The first Dragon King and Crimson Queen standing side by side before the Abyss Gate, not sacrificing themselves, sharing the burden together equally. Love not as weakness, as balance. The Abyss could not consume one soul completely if two souls carried the seal as one. The realization changed everything. The Abyss King roared furiously as darkness exploded across the chamber. You cannot stop what humanity always becomes. Corrupted dragons dove toward them from every direction. But the true dragons answered instantly. Verith slammed into the nearest corrupted beast, while silver and black dragons filled the abyss skies with fire and blood. The chamber became war itself. Kale slowly rose beside Lyra. The curse still burned inside him. But now, crimson light burned with it, balancing it, containing it, for the first time in years. The Dragon King could breathe without pain. He looked at Lyra in stunned disbelief. She smiled weakly through tears. "Told you I wasn't letting you die." The softness in her voice nearly broke him. Even now, even during the end of the world, she still sounded like the lonely servant girl who secretly believed everyone deserved saving. Kyle touched her cheek gently. "You were always stronger than me." Lyra shook her head immediately. "No." Her crimson eyes softened painfully. "I was just less afraid to love people." Those words hit him harder than any blade. Because she was right. Fear ruled his entire life. Fear of prophecy. Fear of loss. Fear of becoming a monster. And that fear almost destroyed both of them. The Abyss King suddenly tore through the dragon battle above and crashed down before them in an eruption of darkness. Its massive body had become unstable now, flickering between shadow and skeletal dragon form, while crimson cracks spread across its chest. The creature was weakening, but so was the world around it. The abyss chamber continued, collapsing violently, while the gate beneath them tore reality apart wider with every passing second. If they failed now, everything would disappear into darkness. The Abyss King looked at Lyra with something almost like sorrow. You still believe they deserve saving? Lyra stood tall beside KL, while dragons roared behind them. No, she answered honestly. Some of them don't. The creature narrowed its eyes. Lyra's voice hardened. But innocent people shouldn't suffer, because powerful people became monsters. Silence followed. Then the Abyss King laughed quietly. Not mockingly. Sadly. You sound exactly like her. The first Crimson Queen. Lyra felt the ancient soul inside her stir softly, not controlling her, guiding her. The Abyss King slowly spread its arms toward the collapsing world around them. Do you know why she failed? Kyle stepped protectively closer to Lyra, but the creature looked only at her, because she tried to save humans who feared her more than they feared darkness. Another memory surfaced through the bond. The first Crimson Queen begging kingdoms to unite against the Abyss, while terrified kings plotted against her behind closed doors. Betrayal, fear, execution, history repeating endlessly. Lyra understood now why the ancient queen almost destroyed the world. But she also understood why she stopped. Because despite all the cruelty, there were still people worth saving. Servants, children, lonely souls, abandoned by powerful men. People like her. The Abyss King watched the realization in her eyes, and finally understood something too. This queen was different. The creature's expression darkened. Then let us see whether love truly outweighs despair. Darkness erupted violently from the Abyss Gate. The final seal was breaking. Not slowly anymore. Completely. The entire chamber split apart, while corrupted dragons poured endlessly upward toward the kingdom above. Even the true dragons began falling beneath overwhelming numbers. Kael immediately grabbed Lyra's hand. It's now or never. She nodded. Together they stepped toward the gate. The abyss fought them instantly. Darkness clawed against their minds with visions of failure, loss, betrayal, and death. Lyra saw herself alone beside Kael's corpse. Kael saw Lyra consumed entirely by the Crimson Queen's ancient rage. But they kept walking, because this time, neither of them walked alone. The mate bond blazed brighter with every step. The true seal awakened beneath their joined souls. Ancient symbols spread across the collapsing gate, while crimson fire and dragon darkness intertwined together into something entirely new. Balance. The Abyss King realized the truth too late. Its crimson eyes widened. No, if the balance returns, Kael raised his sword. Lyra raised her hand, and together, they drove their power directly into the heart of the abyss. The universe screamed. The moment Lyra and Kael released their joined power into the heart of the abyss, the entire mountain beneath Verith erupted with ancient magic. Crimson fire and black dragon flames fused together into blinding light, powerful enough to tear through the darkness infecting the world. Every dragon roared. Every chain shattered, and for the first time in thousands of years, the Abyss King looked truly afraid. The creature staggered backward as balance flooded through the gate itself. Ancient symbols spread across its body like burning cracks, while darkness peeled away from its form in violent waves. Impossible, it whispered, but Lyra finally understood. The Abyss was never unstoppable. It only survived because humanity kept feeding it fear. Fear of differences, fear of power, fear of love. The old kingdoms feared the Crimson Queens. The Dragon Kings feared losing them, and that fear created the very darkness that nearly destroyed the world. Kael gripped Lyra's hand tighter as the mate bond burned between them like a second heartbeat. Not consuming, not controlling, balancing. The curse inside his blood no longer fought against her power. It bowed to it. The abyss chamber collapsed violently around them, while dragons battled overhead through storms of fire and ash. The Abyss King roared in fury and unleashed a massive wave of darkness toward the surface kingdom above. "If I fall," the creature thundered, "then the world falls with me." Black fire surged upward through the mountain, toward the city, toward innocent people, still fleeing through burning streets. Lyra moved instantly. She spread her crimson wings wide while dragon fire exploded from her body into the sky above Verith. The entire kingdom disappeared beneath a massive shield of crimson light, just as the abyss flames crashed into it. The impact shook the continent. Windows shattered for miles. Mountains trembled, but the shield held. Below the glowing barrier, thousands of terrified citizens stared upward in shock, because standing above the burning kingdom was the Crimson Queen herself, not destroying them, protecting them. A little girl standing beside the ruins of a collapsed home whispered softly, "The Dragon Queen saved us." Across the city, dragons landed atop towers and streets beside frightened civilians instead of attacking them. Ancient beasts lowered their heads while crimson fire illuminated the sky like dawn breaking after endless night. Hope spread through Verith for the first time in years, and the Abyss King hated it. The creature screamed with rage as its body began breaking apart beneath the restored balance sealing the gate. "You think they will love you now?" it roared at Lyra. Humans always betray what they fear. Lyra looked down toward the kingdom beneath her shield, the same kingdom that mocked her, hunted her, burned her. Then she looked beside herself, at Kael, at Varosh, at the dragons, fighting to protect people, at servants pulling strangers from burning buildings despite the danger. And she realized something important. Maybe some people would fear her forever. Maybe some kingdoms would never change. But that no longer mattered, because goodness was not something you gave people after they earned it. Goodness was a choice. Lyra looked directly at the Abyss King. "You're wrong," the creature snarled. Lyra's voice thundered across the abyss. "People become monsters when they stop believing they can be better." The mate bond ignited brighter between her and Kael. The true seal completed itself. Ancient chains made of crimson light erupted from the abyss and wrapped around the Abyss King from every direction. The creature fought violently. Darkness exploded. Dragons screamed. The world shook. But the chains held. For the first time in history, the abyss was not being imprisoned through sacrifice. It was being balanced through unity. The Abyss King realized defeat at last, and suddenly, its fury vanished. The creature looked strangely tired, ancien, lonely. Its crimson eyes shifted between Lyra and Kael quietly. So this is what they were meant to become. Kael tightened his grip on Lyra's hand. The Abyss King slowly closed its eyes, and for one brief moment, the monster looked less like a god of darkness, and more like something abandoned by the world long ago. Then, the seal closed. Crimson light consumed the abyss entirely. The creature vanished beneath ancient chains while the gate collapsed inward, sealing the darkness deep beneath the continent once more. Silence followed. No screams, no roars, only falling ash drifting softly through the ruined chamber. The war was over. Lyra's knees suddenly gave out. Kael caught her immediately. Hey, stay with me." The overwhelming magic faded from her body rapidly now, leaving exhaustion behind. Her crimson wings dissolved into sparks, while the ancient queen's power settled quietly beneath her skin again. Not gone. Resting. Lyra looked weakly toward him. "Did we win?" Kael laughed softly through tears. "Yes." Her eyes slowly closed in relief. Then panic crossed Kael's face. "Lyra?" No response. The mate bond still existed, but faintly, too faintly. Fear slammed through him harder than any battle ever had. "Lyra." Varos lowered his massive head beside them, while the surviving dragons gathered silently around the fallen queen. Kael pressed his forehead against hers desperately. "Please don't leave me again." For one terrifying second, nothing happened. Then, the mate bond pulsed softly. Varm. Alive. Lyra opened her eyes weakly. and smiled. Kael actually laughed from relief. A broken, breathless laugh, filled with tears he no longer cared to hide. Above them, dawn finally rose over Verith. For the first time in centuries, the kingdom survived the night. Dawn spread slowly across the ruined kingdom of Verith. Smoke drifted above broken towers, while exhausted dragons rested across the city streets like ancient guardians after war. Fires still burned in parts of the capital, but the black corruption infecting the kingdom had vanished completely. The abyss was sealed. The dragons were free, and somehow, the world still existed. Citizens slowly emerged from hiding as morning light touched the city. Terrified families stepped into ash-covered streets expecting death and found something impossible instead. Silence. Peaceful silence. Then whispers began spreading through the crowd. She saved us. The Crimson Queen, the Dragon Witch, protected the city. People looked upward toward the shattered palace mountain where crimson light still glowed faintly through the broken stone. Not with fear anymore. With awe. Far beneath the ruins, Kael carried Lyra carefully through the collapsed abyss tunnels, while Varos and the surviving dragons followed behind them. The Dragon King refused to let anyone else touch her, as if putting her down might somehow make her disappear again. Lyra rested weakly against his chest, half asleep from exhaustion while the mate bond pulsed softly between them. Alive. Steady. Balanced. Kael kept checking it every few seconds anyway. Lyra noticed eventually. "You know I can feel your panic through the bond now." Kael didn't even pretend to deny it. "You stopped breathing for 30 seconds. She smiled faintly. "And now I'm breathing again." "That's not funny." It was a little funny. Kael looked down at her with exhausted disbelief. After everything they survived, she was teasing him. The realization hit him unexpectedly hard. Normal. This felt normal. Not prophecy. Not fate. Just Lyra. Warm in his arms, while dawn rose over a kingdom they almost lost. When they finally emerged from beneath the mountain, the surviving royal guards immediately dropped to one knee, not only before Kael, before Lyra too. The entire courtyard fell silent as citizens gathered beyond the palace gates, stared at the Crimson Queen standing beside the Dragon King. Ash drifted through the air like snow. Lyra instinctively stepped slightly behind Kael when thousands of eyes turned toward her at once. Old fear. Old habits. Kael noticed immediately. Without hesitation, he reached back and took her hand publicly. The crowd saw it. The glowing mate marks intertwined across their skin. A murmur spread instantly through the kingdom. Some looked uncertain, some afraid, some emotional, but no one looked away. Kael slowly stepped forward before the ruined palace stairs with Lyra beside him. And then, the Dragon King knelt. The entire kingdom gasped. Royal guards looked stunned. Even Lyra froze completely. Kael knelt before her openly, in the ashes of Verith, while morning light illuminated the destroyed city behind them. Not as a ruler forced by magic. Not because prophecy demanded it. Because he chose to. Kael lifted his head toward her. His voice carried across the silent capital. "This kingdom burned you." Lyra's breath caught. "It abandoned you, feared you, tried to destroy you." The crowd lowered their eyes shamefully. Kael's expression softened painfully. "And you saved it anyway." Silence spread across Verith. Deep, heavy, honest. The Dragon King bowed his head before the servant girl they once chained to die. "On behalf of every crown that failed you," he said quietly, "I am sorry." Many citizens began crying openly, because no ruler in Verith history had ever apologized for anything. Lyra stared at him speechlessly, while emotions crashed violently through her chest. Kael looked up again. "And if this kingdom ever raises a hand against you again," black dragonfire flickered softly behind him. "It answers to me first." The dragons surrounding the city roared together. The message was clear. The Crimson Queen stood protected not only by the Dragon King, but by dragons themselves. Lyra's eyes filled with tears, not because of fear, because for the first time in her life, someone chose her publicly. No shame, no secrecy, no hesitation. Kael slowly stood before her again. The mate bond glowed warmly between them, while the entire kingdom watched. Then, unexpectedly, an elderly woman stepped forward from the crowd. A servant, one of the palace laundry workers. Lyra recognized her instantly. The woman bowed deeply with trembling hands. "Thank you," she whispered tearfully. Another person stepped forward. Then another. Soon dozens of citizens bowed throughout the ruined courtyard. Not worship. Gratitude. Lyra looked overwhelmed. Kael leaned closer quietly. "You don't have to forgive them today." She swallowed hard. "I know." And for once, no one demanded she become something smaller to make others comfortable. The surviving council members approached carefully through the crowd next. Unlike before, their expensive robes were covered in ash and fear. Lord Herrick, the oldest noble remaining alive, bowed stiffly. "Your Majesty," he said toward Kael, "the kingdom requires leadership immediately. The Western territories are already demanding answers regarding the witch." Kael's expression turned lethal instantly. "The Queen." The noble froze. Kael stepped forward coldly. "You will address her properly." The man swallowed hard. "My apologies." Lyra touched Kael's arm gently before the situation escalated further. The Dragon King looked at her immediately, anger fading slightly. She gave a tiny shake of her head. "Not now." Kael exhaled slowly, then addressed the gathered nobles with terrifying calm. "The old laws regarding dragon witches are abolished, effective immediately." Shock spread through the council. Kael continued mercilessly. "The priesthood is dissolved. The Western bloodhouses will be investigated for crimes against the crown. And any noble who supported the purges will answer publicly for it." Several nobles went pale instantly. The age of fear ruling Verith had ended overnight, and they knew it. Suddenly, Lyra swayed slightly. Kael caught her immediately. "You need rest." She tried to protest weakly. There are still people hurt, and healers exist for a reason. Despite everything, she laughed softly. Kael looked offended. "You nearly became a divine fire dragon 3 hours ago." "That's fair." The small smile that crossed Kael's face stunned the nearby guards more than the dragon war itself. Because the Dragon King finally looked alive. Varos lowered himself beside them while the surviving dragons gathered across the palace ruins under the rising sun. Lyra looked toward the city quietly. "So what happens now?" Kael followed her gaze. Verith was wounded, broken, changed forever, but still standing. Then he looked back at her, and his answer came without hesitation. "Whatever comes next." His fingers intertwined gently with hers. "We face it together." The mate bond pulsed warmly. No longer a curse, no longer a prophecy, a promise. And above the ruined kingdom of Verith, the dragons finally flew beneath peaceful skies again. The weeks after the fall of Verith became known across the continent as the Ashen Dawn. Messengers carried stories faster than armies. Stories about dragons covering the skies, about the abyss opening beneath the capital, about a servant girl transforming into the Crimson Queen and saving the kingdom that tried to burn her alive. Some kingdoms called it a miracle. Others called it a warning. And many rulers became terrified, because for the first time in centuries, the Dragon Kingdom no longer belonged entirely to kings. It belonged to her too. Lyra hated politics immediately. 3 days after the battle, she nearly walked out of the royal council chamber after listening to nobles argue for an hour about grain taxes while half the capital still smelled like smoke. "They're discussing numbers while people are sleeping in ruins," she whispered furiously to Kael. The Dragon King, seated beside her at the massive black council table, looked completely unsurprised. "Yes, that's insane." "Yes." Lyra stared at him. "You sound too calm about this." Kael leaned back slightly in his chair. "I spent my childhood trapped in these meetings." His voice lowered dryly. "At one point I hoped assassins would attack just to make things interesting." Lyra nearly laughed despite herself. Several nobles looked horrified that the king spoke so casually. Kael ignored them. Lord Herrick cleared his throat nervously. "Your Majesties, regarding the northern rebuilding efforts. Approved, Lyra answered immediately. The council blinked. One noble hesitated. But the treasury calculations. People need homes before calculations, she replied. Silence spread around the chamber, because that answer should have sounded naive. Instead, it sounded obvious. Kyle hid the faintest trace of a smile beside her. The old council hated how quickly she changed the kingdom. Not through force, through compassion. Servants received wages instead of scraps. Dragon hunters were outlawed. The surviving children, orphaned by the battle, were moved into royal protection instead of abandoned to temples. And perhaps most shocking of all, Lyra spent more time among common citizens than nobles. Some mornings she disappeared from the palace, entirely only for Kale to find her helping rebuild damaged districts beside ordinary workers. The first time he found her carrying lumber through the lower city, while still technically recovering from near-divine magical exhaustion, he almost lost his mind. You are the queen. Lyra balanced a wooden beam on her shoulder. And they need roofs. You nearly died. And they nearly died, too. Kale stared at her for several long seconds, then silently picked up the other end of the beam himself. The workers nearby nearly fainted watching the Dragon King carry construction materials through the streets beside a former servant girl. Word spread through the kingdom instantly. The people loved her for it. The nobles absolutely did not. She weakens the image of the crown, Lord Verith complained during one council session. Kale didn't even look up from his documents. Then the image deserves weakening. The noble swallowed hard. Lyra tried not to smile beside him. Still, not everyone accepted her. Fear like the abyss did not vanish overnight. Some citizens still crossed the street when her eyes glowed crimson unexpectedly. Mothers pulled children closer whenever dragons landed near her, and rumors spread constantly through noble circles. The Crimson Queen bewitched the king. The abyss still lived inside her. One day she would destroy them all. Lyra pretended those whispers didn't hurt, but Kale always noticed. One evening, weeks after the battle, Lyra stood alone on the highest palace balcony overlooking the rebuilding city below. Dragons circled peacefully above Verith, while thousands of lanterns glowed through the streets like fallen stars. Beautiful, alive, saved. Yet the loneliness still lingered quietly inside her chest. Kale approached silently behind her. You disappeared from dinner. Lyra didn't turn around. I needed air. Kale stepped beside her at the balcony edge. For a while neither spoke. Then Lyra asked quietly, Do you think they'll ever stop fearing me? Kale answered honestly. Some won't. The truth hurt less coming from him. Lyra folded her arms against the cold wind. I don't blame them. Kale looked at her sharply. You should. She shook her head slowly. They saw me tear the sky apart, Kyle. And they saw you save them. Lyra's crimson eyes lowered toward the city. But what if one day I lose control? The question clearly terrified her. Kale understood why. Power like hers frightened even dragons. But he stepped closer anyway. Closer than anyone else in the world dared stand near the Crimson Queen. If that day ever comes, he said quietly, then I'll stand beside you through it. Lyra looked at him finally. Kale's expression softened. You know what I learned after all this? She shook her head. The abyss was right about one thing. Lyra frowned slightly. People do fear what they don't understand. The wind moved gently through her dark hair, while dragons crossed the moonlit sky above them. Kale reached up carefully and touched her face. But it was wrong about something too. Lyra's heartbeat quickened beneath the mate bond. Kale smiled faintly. Fear isn't stronger than love. The words settled softly between them. No prophecy. No var. Just truth. Lyra leaned into his touch before she could stop herself. And for the first time since the battle, she allowed herself to believe they might actually survive this future together. Then suddenly, Veros roared. Not peacefully. Warning. Both Lyra and Kale looked upward instantly. A royal messenger dragon descended rapidly toward the palace towers, carrying emergency markings burned across its armor. Kale's expression hardened immediately. The dragon handler landed roughly in the courtyard below, and shouted upward toward the balcony. "Your Majesty." Fear filled the man's face. "The Western kingdoms have united armies at the border." Silence crashed across the balcony. Lyra's stomach dropped. Kale's eyes turned cold instantly. The handler continued breathlessly. "They claim the Crimson Queen is too dangerous to live, far beyond the mountains surrounding Verith." War was coming again. The War Council gathered before sunrise. Rain hammered against the palace windows, while thunder rolled across the mountains surrounding Verith. Inside the royal strategy chamber, tension hung so heavily in the air that even seasoned generals barely spoke above whispers. Maps covered the massive stone table. Western kingdoms, Eastern trade alliances, dragon flight routes, enemy troop estimates. Every report said the same thing. The continent was afraid. Lord Herrick pointed shakily toward the western borders. 3 kingdoms confirmed already, possibly 5. Kale stood at the head of the table in black armor, cold and unreadable once more. Their excuse? The old noble hesitated. They claim the abyss corruption may still exist inside the Crimson Queen. Silence followed. Several council members avoided looking toward Lyra entirely. She stood near the balcony doors, wearing dark crimson instead of servant gray for the first time in her life. The royal colors suited her too well. Queenly, dangerous, beautiful, and painfully isolated. Because despite everything she did for Verith, the outside world still saw her as a threat. Kyle noticed her expression immediately. His jaw tightened. Another general stepped forward nervously. "The Western priests are calling you both abominations." Kyle looked unimpressed. "They called me that before Lyra existed." A few nervous laughs escaped around the table before dying quickly. The general swallowed hard. "The Western kingdoms are demanding one condition for peace." No one liked the look on his face. Kale's voice cooled dangerously. "Say it." The man hesitated, then finally whispered, "They want the Crimson Queen surrendered." The room went silent. Every noble carefully avoided breathing too loudly. Lyra stood perfectly still, as if she expected this already. Kyle did not move for several seconds. Then the torches around the chamber exploded into black dragon fire. Everyone flinched. The Dragon King's voice dropped low enough to terrify the entire room. "They marched armies to my borders." The windows cracked from the pressure of his power. "To ask me for my queen?" No one answered, because everyone suddenly realized something terrifying. The Western kingdoms believed Kyle feared Lyra's power. They still did not understand the truth. He loved her far too much to ever hand her over. Kyle slowly looked around the council chamber. "If another person repeats that demand inside my palace," he said quietly, "I will feed them to the dragons personally." No one spoke again. Lyra touched his arm gently. The dragon fire around the room calmed instantly. The council noticed. Of course they noticed. Only she could calm him like that now. Kale looked toward her immediately, anger fading slightly beneath the mate bond. Lyra's voice remained soft. "Threatening the council won't solve this." It made me feel better. A few nobles looked genuinely alarmed that the king admitted that openly. Lyra almost smiled despite herself. Then the chamber doors burst open. Captain Elias hurried inside, covered in rain and mud from the outer watchtowers. Unlike many nobles, Elias had remained fiercely loyal after the battle beneath Verith, mostly because he witnessed Lyra saving his entire battalion from corrupted dragons personally. He dropped to one knee quickly. "Your Majesties." Kale's expression sharpened. "What happened?" "The Western armies brought dragon hunters." The room froze. Lyra's blood ran cold. Dragon hunters were among the cruelest warriors on the continent, mercenaries trained specifically to torture and kill dragons using enchanted weapons. Most kingdoms outlawed them generations ago. The Western kingdoms secretly kept them alive. Elias continued grimly. "They've already slaughtered 2 mountain dragons near the border." Varos roared outside the palace immediately. The sound shook the entire city. Because the dragons heard too. Lyra closed her eyes briefly. Not again. Not more killing. Kale noticed the pain crossing her face, then quietly asked the captain, "How many dragons survived?" Elias lowered his head. "None." The temperature inside the chamber dropped instantly. Kale's dragon eyes flashed gold with fury. But before he could speak, Lyra suddenly walked toward the strategy table. Every noble watched carefully. The Crimson Queen looked down at the maps silently for several seconds before speaking. "They're afraid." One council member frowned. "They're preparing for invasion." "No," Lyra corrected softly. "They're preparing for extinction." The room fell silent. Lyra looked toward the rain-covered windows. They saw dragons burn cities. They saw the sky split open. They heard stories about a queen powerful enough to command monsters. Her voice remained calm, but fear makes people stupid. Kale studied her carefully. "What are you thinking?" Lyra met his eyes. "If we answer fear with more fear, then the abyss wins anyway." Some nobles looked skeptical immediately. Lord Verith crossed his arms. "You can't negotiate with kingdoms marching armies toward us." Lyra's expression hardened slightly. "Watch me." Kale already knew that. "Look." The same look she wore before doing something reckless. "No." Lyra blinked. "You don't even know my plan. You want to go to the border personally." Silence. Several council members looked horrified instantly. "That's insane," one whispered. Kale's expression remained immovable. "You are not walking into enemy armies alone." Lyra stepped closer to him. "If war starts, thousands die. And if they kill you, they won't." Kale laughed once. "A dangerous sound. You have far too much faith in people." Lyra's crimson eyes softened, sadly. "No." She glanced toward the city below. "I just know what fear turns people into." Kale stared at her for a long moment. Because deep down, he understood exactly why she wanted to do this. She spent her whole life wishing someone had tried understanding her before condemning her as a monster. Now she wanted to give others that same chance, even after everything. The mate bond pulsed softly between them. Love, frustration, admiration, terror. Kyle finally exhaled slowly. "I hate this plan. That means you're considering it." "I'm considering locking you in the palace." Lyra folded her arms. "You already tried protecting me through isolation once. Remember how badly that worked?" Several generals awkwardly pretended not to hear that. Kale looked personally attacked. "Using my trauma against me is unfair. It's effective, though." A tiny smile almost appeared on his face before vanishing again. Then suddenly, a deep dragon roar echoed from far beyond the western mountains. No Devaros. Not any dragon loyal to Verith. An unknown dragon, followed by another, and another. The entire council chamber went silent. Elias looked toward the border map in horror. The western kingdoms brought dragons too. Kale's expression darkened instantly. But Lyra felt something worse through the mate bond. Those dragons weren't natural. They felt wrong, corrupted, like something the abyss touched before the gate sealed. Far beyond the mountains, war banners were already rising through the storm. The storm over Verith lasted 3 days. Black clouds covered the mountains, while war drums echoed faintly from the western borders night after night. Refugees from nearby villages flooded into the capital, with stories that spread fear faster than wildfire. The western armies marched beside dragons, but not real dragons. Twisted creatures covered in metal chains and abyss markings carved directly into their scales. Their eyes glowed red. Their flames burned black. Entire villages were destroyed simply for refusing to kneel before the Western Alliance. And every report carried the same horrifying rumor. The Western kingdoms had learned how to corrupt dragons intentionally. Inside the royal war chamber, silence filled the room as another scout finished speaking. "They call them hollow dragons," the scout whispered shakily. "The creatures don't sleep, don't eat. They just obey." Kyle's expression grew darker with every word. Lyra stood near the strategy table, gripping its edge tightly, because she could feel the truth already. The abyss corruption never fully disappeared from the world. Humans simply learned how to weaponize it. Lord Herrick looked pale. "How is that possible?" "The gate sealed." "It did," Lyra answered quietly. Every eye turned toward her. She looked exhausted. For 3 nights she barely slept, because the surviving dragons across Verith kept crying through the mate bond. They felt their corrupted kin dying at the borders, and every death hurt them. The abyss itself is imprisoned, Lyra explained softly. But the fear and cruelty feeding it still exist. Kael watched her carefully. The shadows beneath her eyes had deepened noticeably lately. She was carrying too much again. Just like always. A young messenger rushed into the chamber suddenly. "Your Majesties." The boy dropped to one knee breathlessly. The Western Alliance sent envoys. The council exploded into whispers instantly. Kael remained cold. "How many?" "5 riders, waiting outside the southern gate." Lord Verith scoffed bitterly. "They want negotiations while marching armies toward us?" "No," Kael said quietly. "They want surrender." His eyes shifted toward Lyra instinctively. The room noticed. Again, always her. Lyra slowly straightened. "I'll meet them," Kael immediately answered. "No." Several council members looked relieved he refused so quickly. Lyra crossed her arms. "You already knew I was going to say that, and I already knew my answer." The mate bond pulsed with irritation between them. One noble awkwardly cleared his throat. "Should we leave?" "No," Kael and Lyra answered together. Silence. Then, "Lyra, we can't keep hiding behind palace walls." Kael stepped closer to her. "I am not hiding you. You're trying to protect me." "Yes." Her crimson eyes softened painfully. "You can't protect me from being who I am." Those words hit too close to old wounds. Kael looked away briefly. Because years ago, that was exactly what he tried to do. And it destroyed both of them. Lyra stepped closer carefully. "This isn't the same." Kael met her gaze again. "It feels exactly the same." For a second, neither of them spoke. The council watched silently as the king and queen stood surrounded by unspoken fear and love strong enough to ruin kingdoms. Then Lyra reached for his hand. Not formally, not politically, gently. The tension in Kael's body eased immediately beneath her touch. "I'm not asking to walk into danger alone," she said softly. Kael's jaw tightened. That sounds suspiciously close to asking exactly that. Despite everything, Lyra smiled faintly, and Kael realized with painful clarity that he would rather fight entire armies than see that smile disappear again. The Dragon King exhaled slowly. "I hate how much power you have over me." "Good," Lyra whispered. "Now imagine how I feel." That finally earned the smallest hint of a laugh from him. The council looked stunned. Most had never heard the Dragon King laugh at all. Then Kael became serious again. "We meet the envoys together." Several nobles immediately protested. "Your Majesty, it could be a trap. The queen should not." Kael's dragon eyes flashed gold. The chamber fell silent, instantly. "She decides where she stands," he said coldly. "Not you." Lyra's chest tightened painfully at the words. "Because once upon a time, no one allowed her choices at all." An hour later, the southern gates of Verith opened beneath heavy rain. Citizens gathered nervously along the walls while dragons perched across palace towers overhead, watching the approaching envoys with open hostility. 5 riders emerged from the storm wearing silver armor, marked with Western royal crests. And behind them, 3 hollow dragons walked slowly through the rain. The creatures looked horrifying up close. Their scales were cracked black instead of natural color. Chains pierced directly through flesh and bone, while abyss symbols glowed beneath their skin like infected wounds. One dragon was missing half its jaw, entirely. Yet it still moved, still obeyed. Lyra felt sick, instantly. Those weren't dragons anymore. They were corpses forced to keep fighting. Varos growled low beside her. Every true dragon in Verith reacted with visible rage and grief toward the corrupted beasts. The lead envoy removed his helmet slowly. A handsome man, older than Kael, cold blue eyes, Prince Cedric of the Western Dominion. He smiled faintly upon seeing Lyra. "So the stories are true." Kael stepped slightly in front of her immediately. Cedric noticed, and smirked. "The Dragon King guards his witch carefully." Black dragon fire flickered around Kael's hands instantly. Lyra touched his arm before he incinerated the envoy in front of everyone. Cedric looked amused by that too. Then, his gaze shifted fully toward Lyra. I expected a monster. Lyra stared at him calmly. You brought monsters with you instead. One of the hollow dragons suddenly jerked violently against its chains, as if reacting to her voice. Its corrupted red eyes locked onto Lyra. Then, something impossible happened. The dragon whimpered, softly, like an injured animal begging for help. Everyone froze. Lyra's heart broke instantly, because beneath the corruption, the dragon was still alive. Barely. She took one unconscious step toward it. Kale grabbed her wrist immediately. Lyra. Warning. Fear. The hollow dragon whimpered again, chains rattling painfully around its broken body, and through the mate bond connecting all dragonkind. Lyra suddenly heard the creature's thoughts, not words. Pain. Endless, unbearable pain. Tears filled her eyes immediately. Cedric noticed with fascination. Interesting. Kale's voice dropped dangerously. What did you do to them? Cedric's smile widened. We perfected them. The hollow dragon suddenly screamed. Not aggressively, agonizingly. Black blood burst from the chains embedded in its body, while abyss symbols spread violently beneath its scales. Lyra staggered, because she felt its suffering like her own. And then, the dragon looked directly at her, begging, "Kill me." The hollow dragon collapsed, screaming into the mud. Its massive body convulsed violently, while black blood poured from the chains, piercing its scales. Soldiers stumbled backward in panic, as abyss corruption spread visibly beneath the creature's cracked skin like living poison. But Lyra couldn't move, because through the dragon bond, she felt everything. The agony, the terror, the desperate fragments of the creature, still trapped alive inside its own body. The dragon wasn't merely corrupted. It was imprisoned, forced to obey while the abyss slowly devoured its mind. Tears burned down Lyra's face. Instantly, Kale saw her shaking and stepped protectively closer. "Stop looking at it. I can hear him," she whispered brokenly. The hollow dragon lifted its ruined head weakly toward her. Its glowing red eyes flickered for one brief second. Gold. A true dragon's eyes hidden beneath the corruption. Then the abyss darkness swallowed them again. Cedric watched the scene with disturbing fascination. "Incredible," he murmured. "It recognizes you." Kale's dragonfire exploded around his hands. "You turned living dragons into weapons." Cedric looked unimpressed. "We improved them." The hollow dragon screamed again. This time, the sound shattered windows along the city wall. Citizens watching from above covered their ears in horror, while Varos roared furiously beside Lyra. The true dragons surrounding Verith were becoming unstable now. Angry, grieving, ready to kill. Lyra suddenly stepped forward. Kale grabbed her arm instantly. "No." She looked at him desperately. "He's suffering, and you don't know what that corruption will do to you." The hollow dragon collapsed harder into the mud, chains grinding through broken scales as it writhed in pain. "Please." The plea echoed through Lyra's soul. Not words. Feeling. Desperation so deep, it nearly crushed her. Cedric smiled slowly. So the stories were true after all. His eyes gleamed toward Lyra. "The Crimson Queen really can hear dragons." Kyle moved between them immediately. "Careful." The prince laughed softly. "Oh, I'm being very careful." Rain hammered harder across the city walls while the Western envoys watched with growing tension. Even they looked uneasy standing near the hollow dragons now, because the creatures were becoming harder to control. Lyra slowly pulled free from Kyle's grip. "Trust me." KL looked almost angry at those words. "Do you remember the last time you said that?" Fair point. Despite the situation, the answer nearly made him laugh from disbelief. Only Lyra could joke while standing beside corrupted nightmare dragons and enemy armies. Then her expression softened. "Please." The mate bond pulsed between them. Fear, love, trust. Kale closed his eyes briefly, then stepped aside. The Western envoys looked shocked. Cedric's smile sharpened. "You would really let her approach one of those things?" Kyle's dragon eyes locked onto him coldly. "No." His voice lowered dangerously. "I would let her approach anything she chooses." Lyra walked slowly toward the suffering dragon through the rain. Every soldier along the walls held their breath. The hollow dragon lifted its ruined head weakly as she approached. Up close, the damage looked even worse. Its scales had been carved open repeatedly to force abyss symbols beneath the flesh. Metal hooks pierced through bone. Entire sections of its wings were stitched together with black chains. Lyra's chest hurt just looking at it. Someone did this deliberately. For power. For war. The dragon whimpered again as she stopped before it. And suddenly, a memory hit her. Not hers. The dragon's. Flying freely above snowy mountains. A smaller silver dragon chasing beside him through clouds. Laughter. Freedom. Then fire. Humans. Shah. Screaming. Lyra gasped sharply. Kale tensed instantly from the walls. The hollow dragon looked directly into her eyes. And through the bond, she finally understood. Its name was Arian. Tears mixed with rain across Lyra's face. You were alive this whole time. Cedric stepped closer curiously. Fascinating. Lyra slowly turned toward him. Her expression changed completely. Cold. Dangerously cold. How many? The prince blinked once. How many dragons did you torture like this? Cedric's smile faded slightly. They serve a greater purpose. That's not an answer. One of the Western envoys shifted nervously. Cedric finally sighed. Hundreds. Silence crashed across the walls of Verith. Even Kyle looked stunned. Hundreds. Hundreds of dragons captured and broken into living weapons. Lyra's crimson fire ignited instantly beneath the rain. The hollow dragons behind Cedric recoiled visibly from her power. Not fear of strength. Recognition. Hope. The Western prince noticed too late. You're upsetting them. One envoy whispered nervously. The hollow dragon called Arian slowly lowered his massive head toward Lyra. Not attacking. Submitting. The corrupted chains around his body began rattling violently. The abyss symbols burned brighter. Cedric's expression changed immediately. Move away from it. Lyra ignored him. Instead, she gently touched the dragon's ruined face. The moment her hand met corrupted scales, crimson light exploded through the storm. The hollow dragon screamed, but this time, not in agony. In release, the abyss corruption burned visibly beneath its skin, while black chains cracked apart one by one. Golden light slowly returned to the dragon's eyes for the first time in years. The Western envoys panicked instantly. She's purifying it. Cedric drew his sword. Stop her. Every dragon above Verith roared together. Kyle moved before anyone else. Black dragon fire erupted across the walls as the Dragon King appeared directly beside Lyra in an explosion of darkness and steel. Cedric barely blocked Kale's sword in time. The impact shattered the prince's weapon instantly. Kale's voice came out terrifyingly calm. You brought tortured dragons to my kingdom. Rain hissed against black dragon fire around him. And thought I would allow you to leave peacefully? The Western soldiers backed away in fear. Meanwhile, the hollow dragon continued changing beneath Lyra's touch. The corruption was disappearing. Not completely, but enough. Enough for the real dragon inside to wake again. Arian looked at Lyra with clear golden eyes. Alive eyes. Then the massive dragon bowed before her in the rain. Every person on the walls froze, because they had just witnessed something impossible. The Crimson Queen had healed abyss corruption itself. And far beyond the mountains, the Western armies suddenly became much more dangerous, because now they would fear her more than ever before. The moment Arian bowed before the Crimson Queen, the world changed again. Not just for Verith, for every kingdom watching from beyond the mountains. Because if Lyra could purify abyss corruption itself, then she was no longer merely dangerous. She was powerful enough to destroy entire empires built on fear. Prince Cedric realized it instantly, and Kale saw the exact moment diplomacy died in his eyes. The Western prince slowly stepped backward through the rain, while soldiers tightened grips around weapons nervously. You should not have shown the world that power, Cedric said quietly. Lyra remained beside Arian, one hand still resting against the recovering dragon's face. Then maybe the world should stop creating monsters. Cedric's expression hardened. You still believe kindness changes people? Kael answered coldly before Lyra could speak. No, but dragonfire changes them very effectively. Several Western envoys visibly paled. Arian suddenly spread his damaged wings with a deafening roar. The sound echoed across the mountains like freedom itself. And, one by one, the other hollow dragons began resisting too. Chains rattled violently. Corruption flickered. The creatures sensed Lyra's power and desperately reached toward it through the bond. The Western handlers panicked. They're breaking control. Cedric turned sharply toward his soldiers. Pull them back now. Too late. One hollow dragon ripped directly through its chains. The corrupted beast crashed into the outer wall hard enough to shake the city while Western soldiers scattered in terror. Black fire erupted wildly from its jaws as years of agony exploded into madness. The dragon wasn't evil. It was broken. Lyra immediately moved toward it. Kael grabbed her arm. Absolutely not. It's in pain. It's about to destroy half the wall. The dragon screamed again, smashing through siege equipment, while soldiers fired enchanted spears desperately into its body. Arian roared back furiously. And suddenly, the freed dragon attacked the Western soldiers instead. Chaos exploded across the battlefield. Cedric cursed violently as the remaining hollow dragons became unstable around Lyra's presence. Some fought their chains. Others turned on their handlers outright. The abyss control binding them was collapsing. Kael realized the truth immediately. The corruption isn't permanent. Lyra looked at him sharply. The dragons are fighting it themselves. Hope flashed across her face. If dragons could recover, then maybe there was still a way to save the others too. Cedric saw that realization happen between them, and fear finally crossed his face. Not fear of war, fear of losing control. The Western kingdoms built entire armies around corrupted dragons. If Lyra could free them, everything changed. The prince slowly backed his horse away through the rain. This was a mistake. Kael's dragon fire intensified around him. Yes, the Dragon King agreed coldly. Coming here was. But Cedric only looked toward Lyra one last time. You think saving monsters makes you merciful? His eyes darkened. But mercy is what destroys kingdoms. Then he turned his horse sharply. Retreat. The Western envoys fled instantly, while surviving soldiers scrambled after them through the storm. The remaining hollow dragons were dragged back toward the Western camps, using enchanted chains and magic hooks while they screamed in fury and pain. Arian tried to follow. Lyra grabbed his neck gently. No. The silver dragon trembled beneath her touch. His golden eyes filled with grief as the other corrupted dragons disappeared into the rain, because he knew what awaited them. More chien. More suffering. Kael stepped beside Lyra as thunder rolled overhead. This changes everything. She nodded weakly. They'll come back. Yes. And next time. Lyra looked toward the western mountains darkly. They won't come to negotiate. Kael's silence confirmed it. War was inevitable now. Not because Lyra was a threat. Because she threatened systems built on cruelty. Arian lowered himself weakly beside them, even purified partially. The dragon still looked horribly injured. Kael studied him carefully. How many more are like him? Arian's eyes closed briefly. Then, through the dragon bond, Lyra saw fragments. Kaj. Mountains filled with chained dragons. Dark laboratories beneath western fortresses. Hundreds of creatures slowly corrupted through abyss rituals. Lyra felt sick. They're farming corruption, she whispered, horrified. Kael's expression became lethal instantly. The Western kingdoms were not merely using abyss remnants. They were feeding it intentionally, keeping the darkness alive for power. The exact mistake that nearly destroyed the world beneath Verith. Rain continued pouring across the battlefield, while soldiers slowly approached the damaged wall carefully. None of them looked at Lyra the same way anymore. Not fear alone. Hope too, because they saw her save a dragon. Everyone believed beyond redemption. Captain Elias approached cautiously. Your Majesties. Kael looked toward him. The people are asking questions. What kind of questions? Elias hesitated. They want to know if the hollow dragons can all be healed. Silence fell. Lyra looked toward the distant western mountains, toward the dragons, still trapped in chains, toward the war, waiting beyond the storm, and deep inside herself, she already knew the answer. Yes, but saving them would mean walking directly into the heart of enemy kingdoms. Kale felt the decision forming through the mate bond instantly. No. Lyra blinked. I didn't even say anything. You don't have to. She crossed her arms. They're suffering, and you nearly collapsed healing one dragon. I'm stronger now. Kyle stepped closer. That does not mean you must carry the suffering of the entire world. The words hit hard, because he understood her too well now. Lyra looked down quietly. When I was chained at the execution tower, she whispered softly, I kept wishing someone would save me before it was too late. Kale's chest tightened painfully. And now you want to save them. She nodded once. Rain fell softly around them, while dragons circled the dark skies overhead. Kale closed his eyes briefly, because he already knew how this would end. Not with Lyra safely hidden behind palace walls. Never that. She would walk willingly into fire, if it meant someone else suffered less. And despite how much it terrified him, that was exactly why he loved her. Arian suddenly lifted his head sharply toward the western mountains. A low warning growl rumbled through his chest. Every dragon above Verith reacted instantly. The storm clouds shifted unnaturally. Then distant horns echoed across the borderlands. Not retreat horns, war horns. Kale's expression darkened. They're moving already. Far beyond the mountains, thousands of lights began appearing through the storm. Enem armies. And among them, dozens of glowing red dragon eyes. By nightfall, the western horizon burned red. Thousands of enemy campfires stretched across the borderlands beneath the storm, like a second kingdom rising from darkness. War horns echoed endlessly through the mountains, while corrupted dragon roars rolled across the valleys below Verith. The Western Alliance had not retreated. They had only repositioned. And this time, they came prepared for extermination. Inside the palace war chamber, tension pressed against the walls hard enough to suffocate. Generals argued over troop placements. Scouts delivered reports every few minutes. Dragon riders rushed between towers, while blacksmiths worked through the night forging enchanted weapons below the city. Verith was preparing for siege. Again, Kale stood over the massive border map in full black armor, while dragonfire flickered softly beneath his skin. Cold, focused, terrifying. The king everyone feared had returned, but Lyra noticed something no one else did. Every time the Western dragon symbols appeared on the map, Kale's hand tightened unconsciously, because beyond those mountains were dragons waiting to die, and he knew exactly what that would do to her. Captain Elias pointed toward the eastern ridge. The Western armies split into 3 divisions. They're surrounding the valley approaches. Lord Herrick looked pale. They're trying to trap the dragons inside the capital. Kale nodded once. They learned from the Abyss War. Lyra leaned over the table quietly. How many hollow dragons? No one answered immediately. That silence alone told her enough. Finally, Elias spoke. At least 40 confirmed. The room felt colder instantly. 40 corrupted dragons, enough to erase kingdoms. And somewhere among them, more creatures like Arian, still trapped alive inside nightmare bodies. Lyra closed her eyes briefly. Kale noticed instantly. You're thinking about them again. They're innocent, and they are also weapons aimed at your throat. The sharpness in his voice surprised even himself. Lyra looked at him quietly. Kyle exhaled slowly. I'm sorry. No one in the chamber moved. The Dragon King apologizing openly was still something people hadn't adjusted to. Lyra stepped beside him. You don't have to apologize for being afraid. Kale laughed softly without humor. That's exactly why I should. The mate bond pulsed heavily between them. Love. Exhaustion. Fear neither wanted the other to feel. Before Lyra could answer, another scout burst through the chamber doors. Your Majesty. The young soldier nearly slipped on the wet stone floor. The Western Alliance sent a message. Kale's expression immediately hardened again. Read it. The scout swallowed nervously and opened the sealed parchment. To the kingdom of Verith. Surrender the Crimson Queen before dawn, and your people will be spared. Silence. The scout hesitated before continuing. Refuse. And the age of dragons ends forever. A low growl rolled through the chamber. Not from Kael. From Veros. Outside the palace walls. The great dragon heard everything. Kael slowly took the parchment from the trembling scout, then burned it instantly with black dragon fire. No. One word. Absolute. The council exchanged nervous glances. Lord Varric stepped forward carefully. Your Majesty, perhaps we should consider moving the Queen somewhere safer until... Kael looked at him. The noble immediately stopped speaking. Not because of anger, because of the terrifying calm in the Dragon King's eyes. She stays beside me, Kael said quietly. No one argued after that. Hours later, the council, finally dismissed. The palace halls emptied slowly, while soldiers prepared through the night below. Rain still battered the kingdom endlessly, as if the sky itself feared tomorrow. Lyra stood alone on the eastern balcony, overlooking the distant enemy fires burning beyond the mountains. 40 hollow dragons. She could feel them faintly through the bond already. Blind, fear, confusion. Some were barely conscious anymore. Others had completely surrendered to corruption. Kael approached quietly behind her, carrying a heavy black cloak. You'll freeze. He wrapped it gently around her shoulders before standing beside her at the balcony edge. For a while, neither spoke. They simply watched the enemy fires together. Then Lyra whispered, "What if they're right?" Kael frowned slightly. About what? What if keeping me alive really does endanger everyone? The question hurt him more than any battlefield wound ever had. Kael turned toward her immediately. Do not say that again. But, no. His voice softened painfully. They told you your entire life that your existence was dangerous. The mate bond trembled with emotion. I will not let you start believing them now. Lyra looked away toward the mountains. But people are going to die tomorrow. Yes, his honesty hurt. But Kael had never lied to her about ugly truths. Lyra's voice became smaller. I don't know if I can survive watching more dragons suffer. Kael's expression darkened, because that fear haunted him too. Not losing the war. Losing her heart piece by piece to endless grief. He stepped closer carefully. Look at me. Lyra obeyed slowly. Rain moved softly through her dark hair, while crimson light flickered faintly beneath her skin. Kael touched her face gently. You are allowed to care, he whispered. But you are not responsible for every cruelty in this world. Tears filled her eyes. I just wanted to stop. I know. Kael pulled her into his arms. She melted against him instantly from exhaustion alone. The Dragon King held her tightly beneath the storm, while enemy armies gathered beyond the mountains and dragons screamed through the bond across the dark. For a few fragile moments, they were not king and queen, not prophecy and power. Just two lonely people trying desperately to protect what little peace they found in each other. Kael rested his forehead against hers. If tomorrow becomes ugly, his voice lowered quietly. Promise me something. Lyra already hated the sound of that. What? Promise you'll survive it. She shook her head immediately. Not without you. Kael smiled, sadly. That wasn't the promise. Before she could argue, a violent roar split the night. Both of them looked upward instantly. A dragon was falling from the sky. Huge, silver-scaled, burning. The creature crashed directly beyond the outer walls of Verith, while soldiers screamed below. And when Lyra felt the dragon's pain through the bond, her blood turned ice cold, because the dragon wasn't corrupted. It had been tortured, and carved into its scales was a message written in abyss fire. This is what happens to those who follow the Crimson Queen. The entire palace erupted into chaos. Alarm bells rang across Verith, while soldiers flooded toward the outer walls below. Dragons launched from the towers overhead with furious roars as smoke and fire rose from the impact site outside the capital. Lyra didn't wait. The The moment she felt the dragon's agony through the bond, crimson fire exploded around her body, and she launched from the balcony into the storm. Lyra! Kale cursed and leapt after her instantly. Rain slashed across the night sky, while lightning illuminated the massive crater beyond Verith's walls. Citizens screamed and scattered as guards formed defensive lines around the fallen dragon. But the creature never attacked. It simply lay there trembling, dying. Lyra landed hard beside the crater and froze. The dragon was enormous. Silver once, now barely recognizable. Its wings had been shredded with iron hooks. Chains pierced directly through its spine, while abyss symbols were carved brutally into exposed flesh. One eye had been burned completely shut, and across its chest, the message still glowed in black fire. This is what happens to those who follow the Crimson Queen. Lyra felt sick. Not fear, guilt. The dragon lifted its ruined head weakly toward her, golden eye, trembling, recognizing her, begging. Kael landed beside Lyra moments later, and immediately saw the look on her face. No, she barely heard him. The dragon's pain drowned out everything else. Not physical pain, loneliness, terror, hopelessness. The creature had been tortured publicly just to send her a message, and somewhere far beyond the mountains, the Western kingdoms were probably celebrating it. Kael grabbed her wrist firmly before she could step closer. You're exhausted. It's dying. It could still be a trap. Lyra turned toward him sharply. It's scared. Kael's jaw tightened. Because of course, she understood the dragon's emotions before her own safety again. The silver dragon whimpered softly. The sound nearly shattered her. Through the bond she saw fragmented memories. Moonlit skies. A nest high in frozen mountains. Dragon hatchlings sleeping beside silver wings. Then soldiers. Chai. Screaming. Years of torture. And finally, a command forced into its mind. Fly to the Crimson Queen. Die where she can see you. Lyra's eyes filled instantly. They made him carry his own death sentence. Kael's expression darkened murderously. Captain Elias approached carefully beside several healers. Your Majesties, what do we do? Before Kael could answer, the silver dragon suddenly convulsed violently. Black corruption spread across its scales. The abyss symbols began glowing brighter, and through the mate bond, Lyra felt the horrifying truth. The dragon was turning. Not naturally. The Western kingdoms planted corruption inside him intentionally. A delayed transformation. Kael realized it at the same time. Everyone back. Soldiers retreated instantly. The silver dragon screamed. Black fire burst from its jaws, while abyss corruption exploded beneath its skin like infection waking from sleep. Lyra refused to move. Kael grabbed her hard. Lyra. He's fighting it. The dragon slammed its head against the ground repeatedly, roaring in agony, while chains ripped deeper into flesh. Golden and red flickered violently inside its remaining eye. Fight. Corruption. Fight again. The creature was losing, and it knew it. The dragon looked directly at Lyra. Please, not save me. And me. Lyra broke. Tears streamed down her face, as crimson fire trembled violently around her body. Kael felt the agony tearing through her soul and immediately pulled her against him. You don't have to do this. But she already knew. The dragon could not survive. And if the corruption fully consumed it inside the city, thousands would die. The silver dragon screamed again. This time its voice sounded less like an animal, and more like someone drowning. Lyra slowly pulled away from Kael. Every soldier on the walls watched silently. Rain poured endlessly around them. The dragon lowered its ruined head weakly before her, not as a beast before a queen, as a dying creature asking for mercy. Lyra touched its face gently. I'm so sorry, she whispered. The dragon's eye softened. Relief. Then Lyra closed her own eyes. Crimson fire spread softly from her hand across the dragon's body, not violent like battle flames. Varm. Peaceful. The silver dragon relaxed immediately. The corruption stopped spreading. The pain faded. For one brief moment, the creature looked free again. Then slowly, it stopped breathing. Silence covered the battlefield. Only rain remained. Lyra stayed kneeling beside the dragon long after the fire disappeared. Kael approached carefully. The mate bond ached violently between them. Not because of danger, because he could feel her grief like his own now. Lyra looked small again suddenly. Not the Crimson Queen. Just a girl, kneeling beside something she failed to save. Kael crouched beside her quietly. You didn't fail him. Her voice cracked. I was too late. No. Kael gently brushed wet hair from her face. You made sure he didn't die alone. Those words finally shattered the last of her composure. Lyra buried her face against his chest while sobs shook through her body beneath the storm. The soldiers looked away respectfully. Even dragons perched silently across the walls lowered their heads in mourning. Kael held her tightly while rain soaked through black armor and crimson cloth alike. And slowly, his expression changed. The grief remained, but beneath it, something colder began growing. Rage, not the explosive fury of battle. Something far worse. The quiet rage of a king finally understanding there could be no peace with monsters wearing human faces. Captain Elias approached cautiously. After several minutes, Your Majesty. Kael never looked away from Lyra. Speak. The Western armies crossed the border. Silence. Then another roar echoed from beyond the mountains. Not one dragon. Many. Dozens. The invasion had begun. Kael slowly lifted his eyes toward the dark western horizon, and for the first time since the Abyss War, the Dragon King truly looked ready to burn kingdoms. Dawn never came peacefully. The Western armies attacked before sunrise. War horns thundered across the mountains, while thousands of enemy soldiers poured through Blackfall Valley beneath banners soaked by rain and dragon blood. Siege towers rolled through the mud. Abyss-forged ballistae lined the cliffs. And above them all, 40 hollow dragons darkened the storm sky. The creatures roared like nightmares made flesh as chains rattled from their broken bodies. Black fire illuminated the mountains, while terrified civilians inside, Verith watched the horizon disappear beneath wings and smoke. The final war for the Dragon Kingdom had begun. Inside the palace courtyard, dragons gathered in massive numbers beneath the storm, while soldiers armed themselves in silence. No speeches, no heroic celebration. Everyone understood exactly how ugly this battle would become. Lyra stood beside Veros in black and crimson battle armor designed for dragon riders centuries ago. The armor fit her like something destiny forged specifically for this moment. Queenly, terrifying, beautiful enough to start wars over. Kael approached from behind wearing full Dragon King armor, carved with ancient abyss seals glowing faintly beneath the rain. The courtyard quieted instantly when they stood beside each other. The Crimson Queen and Dragon King. Not prophecy anymore. Not myth. Real. And standing together. Kael looked toward the western horizon. They're aiming directly for the capital. Lyra already knew why. The enemy no longer wanted conquest. They wanted her dead. Captain Elias approached quickly. Scouts confirm Prince Cedric is leading the Central Division personally. Kael's eyes darkened. Good. The single word carried enough menace to make nearby soldiers nervous. Lyra touched his hand gently before the rage consumed him completely. The mate bond pulsed warmly. Kael looked down at her immediately. I know. She didn't ask what he meant, because she felt it too. Fear, not of dying, of becoming monsters in order to win. The dragons sensed it as well. Varos lowered his massive head beside them, while Arion, still weak but recovering, stood nearby among the royal dragons. Every dragon waited for their command, not through fear, trust. Kael stepped closer to Lyra, quietly enough that only she heard him. If the battle turns against us. No. Lyra, we already had this conversation. Kael's expression softened painfully. I need you alive. And I need you alive. Thunder shook the sky above them. Kael stared at her for several seconds, then suddenly kissed her. Right there, in front of the entire army. The courtyard froze. Dragons stilled. Soldiers looked stunned. But Kael didn't care. The kiss felt desperate, honest, like a man trying to memorize someone before war steals them away. When he finally pulled back, Lyra's breath shook softly. That was unfair. Kale almost smiled. I am a king. Unfair is traditional. Despite everything, she laughed quietly. The sound eased something inside him immediately. Then war horns roared again from beyond the mountains. Reality returned. Kael mounted Varos in one smooth motion, before extending a hand down toward Lyra. The entire courtyard watched. Lyra took his hand without hesitation, and together, the Dragon King and Crimson Queen rose into the storm sky above Verith. The dragons followed. Hundreds of wings thundered across the heavens, while soldiers below erupted into cheers powerful enough to shake the city itself. For the first time in history, dragons flew to war beside humans willingly. Blackfall Valley became hell before sunrise. The Western Alliance already occupied the cliffs surrounding the valley when Verith's forces arrived. Enemy siege weapons launched abyss-forged spears through the storm, while hollow dragons screamed overhead. Then the true dragons descended. The collision shattered the mountains. Fire exploded across the valley as dragons slammed into each other through storms of ash and rain. Soldiers vanished beneath claws and collapsing stone, while black fire consumed entire siege lines. Lyra flew beside Kael through the chaos, while crimson dragon fire erupted from her hands toward the hollow dragons attacking below. But she hesitated every time, because she could feel them. The suffering, the fear trapped beneath the corruption. Kael noticed immediately. They'll kill you if you hold back. I know. A hollow dragon dove toward them, suddenly with jaws blazing black fire. Varos twisted sharply, while Kael drove his sword directly through the creature's throat mid-flight. The dragon screamed horribly as abyss corruption exploded outward like black smoke, and for 1 second before dying, its red eyes turned gold. Relief. Lyra's heart shattered again. They're still inside. Kael's voice came out hard through the storm. Then we free the ones we can. The Western armies were prepared for dragon warfare now. Enchanted chains launched from siege towers, wrapped around royal dragons mid-flight, before dragging them crashing into the valley floor below. Abyss spears pierced dragon wings. Explosions of black fire lit the mountains endlessly, and at the center of the battlefield, Prince Cedric waited. The Western Prince stood atop a massive black war dragon, covered entirely in abyss armor, while dozens of elite dragon hunters surrounded him. He looked directly toward Lyra across the battlefield, then smiled. Finally, Cedric raised one hand, and the mountains moved. Lyra's blood turned ice cold, because hidden beneath the cliffs surrounding Blackfall Valley, hundreds of chained dragons suddenly emerged from underground cages. Not hollow dragons, prisoners, broken, starving, used as living shields. The Western armies had hidden them beneath the battlefield intentionally. Kael swore violently. The enemy planned this perfectly. If Verith unleashed full dragon fire now, they would slaughter innocent dragons trapped below. Cedric laughed across the valley. You see the problem now, Crimson Queen? Lyra stared in horror at the chained creatures crying beneath the cliffs. The Western Prince spread his arms toward the battlefield proudly. Mercy loses wars. The battlefield froze. Even through fire and screaming dragons, the horror beneath Blackfall Valley silenced both armies for one terrible moment. Hundreds of dragons chained beneath the cliffs, some barely alive, some too weak to lift their heads, others staring blankly through years of torture and starvation. The Western Alliance had hidden them beneath the battlefield, like living shields, and now every dragon in the sky could feel them. The royal dragons roared in grief and fury, so loudly the mountains shook. Varos nearly lost control entirely. Kael gripped the dragon's reins hard while staring across the valley at Prince Cedric with absolute hatred. You chained your own kind beneath a war zone. Cedric looked unmoved. They are animals. The words hit Lyra harder than any blade, because she recognized that sentence. She heard versions of it her entire life. Witch. Monster. Thing. Not human enough to deserve mercy. The Crimson Queen's fire flared violently around her. Cedric smiled when he saw it. Yes, he called across the battlefield. Show them what you really are. Lyra realized the trap instantly. If she lost control, the Western kingdoms would use it to justify every fear ever spoken about her. If she hesitated, thousands would die. Kael felt the conflict tearing through her soul via the mate bond. Lyra. She looked toward him. The battlefield disappeared for one tiny second. Only him remained. Kael's expression softened, despite the chaos around them. You are not alone anymore. Those words steadied something inside her, immediately. The Crimson Queen closed her eyes briefly, then opened them again calm. Not consumed by rage. Controlled. Chosen. Lyra slowly rose from Varos's back into the storm sky. Every dragon across Blackfall Valley stopped moving instantly. Even the hollow dragons reacted. Crimson fire spread behind her like wings of living dawn, while rain evaporated before touching her skin. The battlefield watched in silence. Cedric's smile faded slightly, because this did not look like a monster losing control. This looked like a queen. Lyra's voice thundered across the valley. Every dragon forced into chains today. The mountains trembled. Leaves this battlefield free. The Western generals laughed nervously. Impossible. There were too many. Too much corruption. Too many chains. Then Lyra spread her arms, and the dragon bond awakened completely. Every dragon across Blackfall Valley screamed simultaneously. Not in pain. Recognition. Crimson light erupted across the battlefield as ancient symbols ignited beneath every chained dragon hidden underground. The chains started breaking. On they be on. Cedric's face lost color instantly. No. The trapped dragons roared in confusion and shock as abyss-forged restraints cracked apart beneath Lyra's power. Some creatures collapsed too weak to stand. Others burst upward through the cliffs in explosions of stone and fire. The battlefield descended into chaos instantly. Western soldiers panicked. Dragon hunters screamed orders, and the freed dragons turned on their captors. Cedric roared furiously. Kill her. Ballistae fired toward the sky. Abyss spears shot directly at Lyra from every direction. Kael moved instantly. Varos slammed through the storm like living darkness, while Kael's black dragon fire obliterated the incoming barrage midair. The Dragon King positioned himself between Lyra and the entire battlefield without hesitation. Cedric watched with cold fascination. You would die for her so easily. Kael's answer came without hesitation. Yes. The Western prince looked almost disturbed by the honesty. Because men like Cedric understood power, control, fear, but love strong enough to face death willingly? That terrified them. The freed dragons erupted fully from beneath the valley now. Hundreds of abused creatures filled the battlefield skies, while chains dragged behind broken wings and scarred bodies. Some attacked Western forces immediately. Others simply fled, too traumatized to keep fighting at all. And among them, the hollow dragons began breaking control again. Lyra's power was destabilizing the corruption binding them. One corrupted dragon suddenly crashed directly into a Western siege tower instead of attacking Verith forces. Another turned on dragon hunters trying to chain it again. The Western battle lines started collapsing. Cedric saw the disaster unfolding and finally abandoned his calm facade. Stop her, Dulat. The battlefield itself had changed. This was no longer Verith defending against monsters. This was dragons rising against slavery. The freed creatures screamed through the skies like a revolution, born from centuries of suffering. Kael fought beside Lyra through the storm, while dragons filled the heavens around them. And for one impossible moment, they were winning. Then the ground split open. Abyss fire exploded through the center of Blackfall Valley. Everyone froze. Not from the sealed gate beneath Verith. A different source. Smela. Artificial. Hidden. Cedric slowly smiled again, and Lyra's blood turned cold. Because beneath the battlefield, the Western kingdoms had built another abyss ritual. The ground continued cracking, while black fire spread beneath the chained dragon corpses covering the valley floor. Kyle realized it instantly. They fed dragon deaths into the ritual. Cedric spread his arms proudly. You thought corruption needed the original gate? The Western Prince looked toward Lyra with triumph blazing in his eyes. Fear always finds a new doorway. The battlefield began shaking violently. Freed dragons screamed overhead. And slowly, something enormous started moving beneath Blackfall Valley itself. Not the Abyss King. Something new. Something created from endless tortured dragon souls and artificial abyss corruption. Cedric laughed while darkness erupted beneath the battlefield. Meet the future of this world, Crimson Queen. Then, the mountain exploded, and a dragon larger than anything Lyra had ever seen clawed its way out of the abyss fire. A corse dragon, made from hundreds of dead dragons fused together by corruption and pain. Blackfall Valley disappeared beneath screaming darkness. The corpse dragon tore itself from the shattered mountain in a storm of black fire and rotting wings, while entire cliffs collapsed around it. The creature looked less like a living being and more like a nightmare stitched together from centuries of dragon suffering. Hundreds of skulls twisted through its massive body. Broken wings fused into enormous limbs. Chains dragged behind it like rivers of death. And worst of all, every soul trapped inside it was still screaming. Lyra nearly fell from the sky the moment the dragon roared, because through the dragon bond, she heard all of them. Whine. Endless, unbearable pain. The corpse dragon wasn't alive. It was a mass grave forced to move. The freed dragons across the battlefield panicked instantly. Some fled the valley entirely, while others screamed in terror at the abomination rising beneath them. Even Varos recoiled. Kyle's expression darkened with horror. Cedric laughed from atop his armored war dragon, while abyss fire illuminated his face. The Western Kingdoms spent decades perfecting it. The corpse dragon opened its jaws. Thousands of dragon voices screamed together from inside its throat. Then, black fire erased an entire mountain ridge. The explosion annihilated both Western and Verith soldiers instantly. Cedric didn't even flinch. Lyra stared in horror. He doesn't care who dies. Kyle's answer came cold. People like him never do. The corpse dragon turned slowly toward the sky, toward Lyra, because every corrupted soul trapped inside it could feel the Crimson Queen calling to them. The creature lunged upward. Fast. Far too fast for something that massive. Move. Kyle slammed Varos sideways just before jaws large enough to swallow towers snapped shut where Lyra had been moments earlier. The shockwave alone sent dragons spiraling through the storm. The battlefield erupted into panic. The corpse dragon did not distinguish friend from enemy. It devoured everything. Western siege towers vanished beneath claws. Entire dragon flights disappeared inside abyss fire. Cedric's own soldiers began fleeing in terror, but the prince only watched Lyra, obsessed, because even now, he believed he could force her to become a monster too. "Kill it!" generals screamed below, but no one knew how. The creature regenerated instantly from every wound. Destroyed dragon flesh reformed endlessly through abyss corruption, while trapped souls continued screaming from inside its body. Lyra felt every scream like knives. Kyle saw her shaking. "Don't listen to it. I can't block them out." The corpse dragon roared again, and suddenly Lyra saw the truth hidden inside it. Not just dead dragons, living ones too. Some still trapped conscious within the fused flesh. Horrified, unable to escape. Tears filled her eyes instantly. There are survivors inside. Kyle's heart dropped. Of course there were. Cedric smiled when he realized they understood. "You see the problem now?" The Western Prince spread his arms toward the abomination proudly. "If you destroy it, you kill them too." The battlefield froze again. Another impossible choice. Mercy or victory. Lyra closed her eyes briefly. The abyss always forced the same decision. Become cruel enough to win, or lose everything trying to stay good. Kyle moved beside her in the storm. "Lyra." She looked toward him weakly. Kale's voice lowered quietly beneath the battle screams. "You do not have to save everyone. One. The words hurt because he meant them kindly, because he already knew what she was about to try, and it terrified him. Lyra looked back toward the corpse dragon thrashing across the valley while trapped dragons screamed from inside its flesh. Then she whispered softly, "But I have to try." Kyle closed his eyes briefly. Of course she would. The mate bond pulsed heavily between them. Fear, love, acceptance. Kale finally exhaled. "Then we do it together." The corpse dragon suddenly crashed through the battlefield again, devouring Western soldiers and dragons alike, while abyss fire consumed entire sections of Blackfall Valley. Cedric screamed furious orders at retreating troops. But no one controlled the monster anymore. The Western kingdoms created something even they could not command. And now the battlefield itself was dying beneath it. Lyra slowly rose higher into the storm sky, while crimson fire spread around her body. The corpse dragon immediately noticed. Every screaming dragon soul inside it turned toward her simultaneously, begging. The realization nearly destroyed her. They weren't asking to be saved anymore. They were asking to be freed. Kale flew beside her on Varos through the storm clouds. "What's your plan?" Lyra's expression broke softly. "I don't know." For the first time since awakening as the Crimson Queen, she truly didn't know how to win. Then, suddenly, Arian roared. The silver dragon flew upward beside them despite his injuries while dozens of freed dragons followed behind him. Not attacking, gathering. The dragons surrounded Lyra in widening circles through the storm sky. Kyle frowned slightly. "They're answering you." "No." Lyra realized the truth, instantly. The dragons were offering something. Trust. Power. The ancient bond between dragonkind and the Crimson Queen deepened suddenly as hundreds of dragons across the battlefield opened themselves willingly to her magic. Lyra gasped sharply. She could feel all of them now. Every heartbeat. Every soul. And buried beneath it all, a memory older than kingdoms surfaced. The first Crimson Queen standing beside thousands of dragons beneath crimson stars. Not ruling them. Connected to them. Together. Lyra's eyes widened. "There's a way." Kyle looked toward her instantly. The corpse dragon roared below while the valley burned around it. Lyra's crimson eyes filled with terror and hope simultaneously. "I can separate the souls inside it." Kyle immediately understood the second half of that sentence. The cost. No. But Lyra was already crying. "Coil. No. If I connect to all of them at once, it will tear your mind apart." The corpse dragon screamed again. Thousands of trapped dragon souls begging for release. The battlefield dying beneath endless suffering. And Lyra, already making the choice. Kale saw it happening through the mate bond in real time. And for the first time, since loving her, the Dragon King truly understood helplessness. No. Kale grabbed Lyra's wrist hard enough that crimson fire burst between their skin. Rain whipped violently around them while dragons screamed across the burning skies of Blackfall Valley. Below, the corpse dragon continued, tearing the battlefield apart as trapped souls cried endlessly from inside its monstrous body. But Kyle saw only her. Only Lyra, and the horrifying certainty forming behind her eyes. "You said we face things together," she whispered shakily. "Not this. If we destroy it normally, the dragons inside die." Kale's voice broke sharper than intended. "And if you connect yourself to that thing, you die." The mate bond pulsed painfully, because neither of them could hide emotions anymore. Lyra felt his terror completely. Not fear of battle. Fear of losing her. Again. Always her. The corpse dragon suddenly roared loud enough to split the storm clouds overhead. Abyss fire exploded through the valley floor, while entire sections of the mountain collapsed beneath its weight. More soldiers died. More dragons screamed. Time was running out. Arian landed heavily beside them through the storm, golden eyes fixed desperately on Lyra. Then the silver dragon lowered his head, offering trust. One by one, the freed dragons followed, an entire sky full of wounded creatures bowing before the girl who gave them hope again. Kale saw Lyra's heart breaking wider with every second, because this was who she truly was. Not a queen, not a weapon. A girl incapable of turning away from suffering, even when it destroyed her. Kyle closed his eyes briefly. Defeat, not against enemies, against love itself. When he opened them again, the rage was gone. Only sorrow remained. You already decided. Lyra looked shattered. I'm sorry. Kale laughed once softly through the storm. That phrase is becoming a terrible tradition between us. Tears mixed with rain across her face. The corpse dragon screamed again below them, while abyss fire spread closer toward the fleeing armies trapped in the valley. Lyra stepped closer carefully. I don't want to leave you. Those words nearly destroyed him. Kyle touched her face gently. You won't. But I won't let you. The certainty in his voice stunned her. Kale's dragon eyes burned gold beneath the storm. You are not facing this alone. The mate bond surged suddenly, and Lyra realized what he intended. No. Kyle ignored her completely. Instead, he turned toward the dragons filling the sky. Then the Dragon King did something no ruler in history had ever done. He bowed his head before them. Lend us your strength, he said quietly. The dragons roared together. The sky itself answered. Ancient power surged across Blackfall Valley as hundreds of dragons opened the bond willingly, not only to Lyra now, to Kale too. The Dragon King and Crimson Queen became the center of a living storm made from dragon souls, fire, grief, and hope. Lyra stared at him in horror. You can't share this burden. I can. The corruption inside you will kill me eventually anyway. Carl. He grabbed her face firmly. Listen to me. The battlefield vanished again. Only him remained. Only the man who spent 15 years regretting one choice. I am done surviving while you suffer alone. Lyra's breath shook violently. The mate bond burned, brighter than ever before. Not just love now. Partnership, choice, equality. The ancient balance, fully awakened. Far below them, the corpse dragon suddenly turned upward sharply. The creature sensed what they were doing and panicked. For the first time since its creation, the monster was afraid. It lunged toward the sky with a roar made from 1,000 dying dragons. Kale and Lyra moved together. Crimson fire and black dragon flames exploded around them as they rose higher into the storm clouds, while every dragon in Blackfall Valley roared beneath them. The bond opened completely. Lyra gasped. She felt everything. Every dragon soul. Every memory. Every scar. And Kale. Kale stood beside her inside the storm of souls without letting go of her hand once. The corpse dragon slammed into the sky beneath them. Too late. Lyra closed her eyes, then reached into the monster. Not physically, spiritually. The experience shattered her instantly. Pain beyond imagination flooded her mind as thousands of trapped dragons screamed through the bond all at once. Fear, torture, loneliness, endless years trapped inside darkness. Lyra nearly collapsed, but Kale held her up. I'm here, he whispered desperately through the bond. Stay with me. The corpse dragon thrashed violently beneath them while crimson light spread across its fused body. The trapped souls felt her. Felt him. Felt hope. One dragon soul separated. Then another. Then dozens. Golden lights began rising from the corpse dragon's flesh like stars escaping darkness. Cedric watched from below in horror. No. The Western Prince finally understood what he was witnessing. Not power. Compassion stronger than corruption itself. The corpse dragon screamed as pieces of its body began falling apart. The trapped souls were leaving, returning to freedom, but the process was destroying Lyra. Blood ran from her nose. Her hands trembled violently. Too many souls. Too much pain. Kyle felt her consciousness slipping. Lyra. She barely heard him. The dragon's suffering drowned everything. Then suddenly, a tiny dragon soul touched her gently. Not begging, comforting. A hatchling, one of the youngest, trapped inside the corpse dragon. The little soul curled softly around Lyra's consciousness like warm light. Then another followed. Then hundreds. The dragon started helping her carry the burden. Recoil felt it too, and suddenly understood something beautiful. The Crimson Queen was never strongest because dragons obeyed her. She was strongest because dragons loved her. The corpse dragon began collapsing entirely now. Dark flesh disintegrated, while freed souls rose into the storm sky like rivers of golden stars. The battlefield below fell silent. Even enemy soldiers stared upward speechlessly, because for the first time in history, they witnessed mercy powerful enough to defeat horror. Then, the corpse dragon opened its final remaining eye and looked directly at Prince Cedric. The Western Prince froze, because inside that dying eye, every tortured dragon soul remembered him. Prince Cedric tried to run. For the first time since the war began, true fear finally shattered the cold arrogance across his face as the corpse dragon turned toward him with its final remaining eye, an eye filled with thousands of trapped souls. Remembering, the battlefield went silent. Even the storm itself seemed to pause. Cedric backed his war dragon away desperately, while Western soldiers scattered around him in panic. No, the corpse dragon roared, not with rage, judgment. The sound shook Blackfall Valley hard enough to crack the mountains, while golden dragon souls spiraled through the storm sky like stars finally escaping darkness. And every single soul looked toward Cedric. The Western Prince screamed orders wildly. Kill it. No one moved. His soldiers were already retreating. His dragon hunters were throwing down weapons. Even the remaining hollow dragons had stopped obeying, because the corruption controlling them was breaking apart under Lyra's power. The age of fear sustaining the Western kingdoms was collapsing in real time. Cedric realized it, and his face twisted with desperation. "You need me," he shouted toward the battlefield. "Without the Western Alliance, the abyss will return." Kale's dragon fire burned brighter through the storm. "No," the Dragon King answered coldly. "Men like you are why it returned." Cedric turned toward Lyra then, toward the Crimson Queen floating above the valley, surrounded by freed dragon souls and crimson light. Hatred exploded across his face. "You did this." Lyra looked exhausted, blading, barely conscious from the burden of thousands of souls moving through her spirit. But her eyes remained painfully calm. "No," she whispered softly. "You did." The corpse dragon moved. Its massive, dying body lunged downward through the storm, directly toward Cedric and the Western command lines. The prince's war dragon tried fleeing, but the corrupted beast suddenly stopped mid-flight. Then slowly, it turned against him. Cedric's eyes widened in horror. "No." The hollow dragon looked at him with fading red eyes, then golden, free for the first time in years. The creature roared directly into Cedric's face before throwing him violently from its back. The Western Prince crashed hard into the valley floor below, while soldiers scattered away from him. The corpse dragon descended, massive, broken, dying, and inside its body, thousands of souls finally demanded justice. Cedric crawled backward through mud and blood, while the battlefield watched silently. "No, please." The monster lowered its enormous skull above him. The Western Prince stared upward, trembling. At last he understood what every dragon he tortured felt. Powerless. Alone. Terrified. Then the corpse dragon stopped. Its remaining eye slowly shifted toward Lyra, waiting. The entire battlefield held its breath, because even now, the monster would obey the Crimson Queen's choice. Kill him, or spare him. Kyle looked toward Lyra carefully. The mate bond trembled with exhaustion and grief between them. She could end Cedric here. No one would blame her. After everything he had done, most of the battlefield wanted it. Even the dragons. Lyra stared down at the man who created hollow dragons, who tortured innocent creatures for power, who tried to burn kingdoms simply because he feared losing control. And for one terrible second, the darkness whispered again, "End him. He deserves it." The same abyss whisper that destroyed kingdoms for centuries. Lyra closed her eyes briefly, then slowly shook her head. No more. The corpse dragon relaxed instantly, not disappointed, relieved. Cedric stared upward in disbelief. "You spare me?" he whispered shakily. Lyra looked at him quietly. No. The Western Prince frowned in confusion. Then Kale landed beside him. The Dragon King's expression carried something far worse than rage. Judgment. You don't die a martyr today, Kale said coldly. Cedric tried standing, but black dragon fire wrapped around him instantly like chains. You face the world alive. Horror crossed Cedric's face, because suddenly he understood. Death would have been easier. Kale turned toward the battlefield, toward both armies, toward every soldier and dragon watching, and his voice thundered across Blackfall Valley. Look carefully. The storm shook around him. This is the man who chained dragons. Black fire tightened around Cedric. This is the man who fed suffering into the abyss. The freed dragons roared overhead. And this, Kale's eyes burned gold, is the last king who will ever rule through fear. The Western armies broke completely after that. Soldiers threw down weapons. Dragon hunters fled into the mountains. The surviving hollow dragons turned away from battle entirely, too broken and exhausted to continue fighting. The war ended not with conquest, but collapse. The corpse dragon finally began dying completely now. Its massive body crumbled apart into ash and golden light, while dragon souls rose peacefully into the storm sky. One, Bewan. Thousands. Free. Lyra swayed violently in the air. Too much exhaustion. Too much grief. Kael caught her immediately before she fell. The moment she touched him again, the mate bond pulsed softly. Varm. Safe. Lyra buried her face weakly against his shoulder while the battlefield below watched the Crimson Queen cry quietly for dragons she never even knew. Kael held her like she was something infinitely precious. Because she was. The storm above Blackfall Valley slowly began clearing for the first time since the war started. Sunlight broke through dark clouds. Golden light spilled across the valley full of exhausted soldiers, wounded dragons, and burning ruins. And slowly, the freed dragon souls vanished into the sky, like stars finally returning home. Arian landed heavily beside Kael and Lyra, while dozens of surviving dragons followed. No chains, no corruption. Free. The silver dragon lowered his head before Lyra one final time. Not submission. Gratitude. Then Arian spread his wings and flew toward the horizon with the surviving freed dragons following behind him. Not toward kingdoms. Toward freedom. Lyra watched them disappear through tears, then finally whispered softly, "They're safe now." Kael pressed his forehead gently against hers. Yes. And for the first time, in a very long while, the world felt quiet again. The war officially ended 7 days later. Not because treaties were signed, not because kingdoms suddenly became good, but because fear finally lost its throne. News of Blackfall Valley spread across the continent faster than wildfire. Entire Western armies surrendered after witnessing hollow dragons turn against their masters. Noble houses involved in dragon torture collapsed overnight, as terrified citizens revolted against them, and everywhere the same story spread. The Crimson Queen spared the man who tried to destroy her. That single choice changed more kingdoms than Dragonfire ever could. Inside Verith, the city slowly healed. Burn districts were rebuilt. Dragon sanctuaries replaced old military prisons. And for the first time in recorded history, dragons flew openly above human cities, without chains. The world was changing. Slowly. Painfully. But truly changing. Still, peace did not come easily to Lyra. Some nights she woke trembling from memories left behind by the corpse dragon. Thousands of trapped souls, screaming inside darkness. Other nights she stood silently on palace balconies, watching the skies, as if expecting war to return again. Kael noticed. Every time. Always. One evening near winter's first snowfall, Lyra stood alone beside the restored palace gardens overlooking Verith, glowing peacefully beneath lantern light. The kingdom looked beautiful now. Alive. Yet part of her still waited for everything to break again. Kael approached quietly behind her, carrying 2 cups of steaming tea. "You disappeared from dinner." Lyra accepted the cup softly. "I needed quiet." Kyle stood beside her, beneath falling snow. For a while, neither spoke. Then Lyra whispered, "Do you ever wonder if we actually changed anything?" Kyle looked toward the city below. Children laughed somewhere in the streets. Dragons rested openly atop towers, where soldiers once aimed weapons at them. Servants walked through palace halls without lowering their eyes anymore. "Yes," he answered honestly. "All the time." Lyra looked down at her tea. "The world still feels cruel." Kale's expression softened painfully. "It probably always will." She sighed quietly. "That's not very comforting." "No." He glanced toward her gently. "But you are." The mate bond pulsed warm between them. Not burning anymore. Not overwhelming. Simply there. Steady. Like breathing. Lyra leaned slightly against his shoulder without thinking. And Kyle realized something strange. For the first time in his entire life, silence no longer felt lonely. Suddenly, footsteps approached through the snow-covered garden paths. Captain Elias bowed quickly. "Your Majesties." Kale looked mildly annoyed at being interrupted. "What happened?" The captain smiled faintly. "A delegation arrived from the Eastern Kingdoms." Lyra frowned slightly. "Another political problem?" Elias actually laughed quietly. "No, my queen." He handed her a folded letter. Lyra opened it carefully, then blinked. Inside was a child's drawing. Crude dragons flying above a city beneath bright red skies. And beneath it, written shakily in uneven handwriting, "Thank you for saving my mother during the battle. I want to become a dragon rider someday. Mira, ajuoito." Lyra stared silently at the paper. Then, another letter appeared. And another. Hundreds. Children from different kingdoms. Families saved during the war. Former dragon handlers apologizing for what they helped create. Even letters from western villages secretly sheltering freed dragons now. Kale watched Lyra's expression carefully while she read through them. Hope returned slowly to her eyes. Small, fragile, but real. Captain Elias smiled. "The Eastern Kingdoms are asking permission to send dragon scholars to Verith." Kale raised an eyebrow. "Scholars. They want to learn how humans and dragons can coexist." Silence settled softly through the snowy gardens. Then Lyra laughed quietly. Disbelieving. Emotional. Beautiful. Kyle stared at her like the sound itself could heal broken worlds. Because maybe it could. The captain excused himself politely, leaving them alone again beneath falling snow. Lyra looked toward the peaceful kingdom below. They really want to change. Kale stepped closer behind her. "Some of them do. And the others?" His dragon eyes darkened slightly. "We glare at them until they behave." Lyra laughed again. "That's not diplomacy. It has worked surprisingly well." She shook her head, smiling. Then suddenly Kyle reached into his coat slowly. Lyra frowned slightly. "What are you doing?" The Dragon King looked nervous. Actually nervous. Which felt more terrifying than wars. Kale pulled out a small black box, carved from dragonstone. Lyra froze, instantly. "Kyle." He looked almost offended. "You sound alarmed." "I'm alarmed." "That's fair." Snow drifted softly around them, while lantern light reflected across the gardens. Kale opened the box. Inside rested an ancient silver ring, wrapped with crimson dragon symbols. Beautiful. Simple. Real. No royal crown. No political spectacle. Just him. Kale took a slow breath, then spoke quietly. "My entire life I thought love was something kingdoms used against you." The mate bond trembled softly, but then a servant girl burned down half my emotional defenses. Lyra covered her face, laughing through tears instantly. "That's your proposal speech?" "I practiced being romantic for hours." "It's terrible." Kyle looked deeply offended, then softer. "Honest. But it's true." He stepped closer. "I don't want a queen because prophecy chose her." Snow melted softly against black dragon fire flickering beneath his skin. "I want you." His voice lowered gently. "Every impossible, stubborn, compassionate part of you." Lyra's eyes filled completely. Kale swallowed once, then finally asked, Will you stay beside me, even after the world stops needing heroes? Silence. Soft snow. A peaceful kingdom glowing beneath dragon wings. And Lyra, realizing something beautiful. For the first time in her life, someone was asking her to stay. Not sacrifice. Not hide. Not survive alone. Stay. Lyra kissed him before answering. Varm, laughing softly through tears. And when she finally pulled back, yes, the mate bond exploded into warm golden light around them while dragons across Verith roared joyfully into the winter sky. Far above the kingdom, Varos launched into the air with a thunderous roar while hundreds of dragons followed beneath falling snow. The people of Verith looked upward, smiling as dragons crossed peaceful skies once feared by everyone, and standing together in the palace gardens below. The Dragon King and the Crimson Queen watched a broken world begin healing at last.